All right, committee members and participants, we are now live.
Good morning, everybody. Today is Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023, and we are prepared to start the Committee on Education. Today's hearing is about the school building authority. So with that being said, good morning. I understand that state law requires the following announcement be made at the beginning of every remote public hearing as follows. Due to the current public health emergency, city council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, the Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearings, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come. Mr. Maynard, will you please call the roll to take in attendance? Members that are in attendance, will you please indicate you're present when your name is called? Also, say a few brief words when responding so that your image will be displayed on the screen. Mr. Maynard?
Chairman Thomas.
Present.
Vice Chair Brooks. Vice Chair Brooks, you're muted.
I'm present. Thank you. I was having some problems with my mute button.
No worries. Thank you, Councilmember Brooks. Councilmember Squilla.
Morning, Mr. Chair and colleagues present.
Good morning, Mr. Councilmember. Councilmember Gaudier.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, colleagues in Philadelphia, present.
Good morning, Councilmember. Councilmember Phillips. And Councilmember Lozada.
Thank you, Mr. Maynard. A quorum of the committee is present and the hearing is now called to order. This is a public hearing on the Committee of Education regarding resolution number 230330. Mr. Maynard, would you please read the title of the hearing resolution to be heard today?
Of course, Mr. Chair. Resolution 230330, authorizing the Committee on Education to hold hearings investigating the use of an independent authority to bond and manage the school facilities modernization that safety calls for and students, parents, teachers, and communities deserve.
Thank you, Mr. Maynard. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have today, everyone who's been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is being recorded, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. By continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for questions or comments they have for the witnesses, I will note for the record at this time that we will only use the chat feature for those who are logged in. The chat feature is a part of the app. We will only use the chat feature to recognize for council members to signal that they want to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for this purposes. Before we call the first panel, I just want to take a couple moments to offer a few remarks as it relates to our conversation here today. I'm a person who's born and raised in the city of Philadelphia. I'm a product of the school district of Philadelphia. So when we look at some of the issues that we're facing as it relates to school facilities, it especially hits home for me, considering Frankfort High School is one of the schools that is in limbo right now. As an alumni of Frankfort High School, a proud graduate of the school district of Philadelphia, and somebody who still works closely with the schools. I'm outside of being on city council. I still coach high school basketball. I'm the president of the Coaches Association for the Public League for Boys Basketball. So I spend a lot of time in schools, in gyms, in facilities, attending athletic events and activities. And I can tell you firsthand that this is one of the most pressing issues that we have as it relates to the idea of assuring every child has the opportunity to get a quality education. So as we begin to explore this issue, I also want to recognize that as it relates to education and the direction of education in the city of Philadelphia, we have all new leadership. Our superintendent just celebrated 1 year as being a superintendent. The chair of our school board was just recently named the chair of the school board at the end of the last calendar year. And I was recently named the chair of the education committee in the fall of last year. So over the last few months, we've all been brainstorming and racking our mind, not just around issues with public safety and quality education, but issues around facilities as well, too. So we ask the public to be patient with us as we explore best practices. That's what today's conversation is about, looking at what other cities have done and what places have been successful as it relates to tackling this issue. With that being said, I would like to take a moment as the chair of the committee to recognize Councilmember Brooks, who's the vice chair of the committee, for comments. And then after that, we will start with our first panel, which would be you, Ms. Kim. Councilmember Brooks.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Thomas. I want to thank you for organizing this hearing today, and I want to thank all my colleagues and those who are providing testimony for attending this important hearing today. We know that our schools are in desperate need of repair, and this year we saw 6 schools close because of asbestos, and we saw hundreds of early dismissals and closure because of extreme heat, with air conditioning for our schools, for years away. Every day, the children and educators of our city attend schools that are falling apart and lack the environment and the services needed for full education. The school buildings in Philadelphia are unsafe and harmful for our kids and our teachers and our staff. And the problems in our school facilities prevent our children from learning as they should. And the school closures that come on hot days when dangerous issues come to the surface are deeply disruptive to families, students, and communities. And this is not an accident. It's a terrible situation we find ourselves in as a result of decades of disinvestment to our schools. But all is not lost, and we have all the tools in front of us that we need to climb out of this hole. My oldest daughter is 32 years old, and over the past 32 years of being a public school mom and grandmom now, none of my children have attended a school that I didn't have to fight for. And I'm not new to this fight. I've learned the only way we win is by working together. And we've won before through the cooperation of many other people that are on this Zoom. And we can win again. We have the resources to begin and getting this work done, including a massive state surplus and federal dollars and city funds. And we can create thousands of good union jobs by modernizing and constructing our school buildings. We can create green buildings that save us millions in energy costs and provide clean air and water for neighborhoods to serve as a center of the climate resiliency. And we can create healthy, modern spaces for our children, our teachers, and our staff that allow for quality education and activities that our children deserve. And we can create schools that are centers of our neighborhoods and the bedrock of strong, healthy communities and democracy. And we know that this transformation of Philly schools is possible because so many of these visionary leaders in this hearing today, this morning, has shown us that it is possible. Before we start this hearing, I want to lay out a few principles that I have learned from decades of working in and fighting for Philly schools. Any effort to modernize our schools must center and be accessible for Philadelphia students, families, and community members and educators, but it has to be responsive to their needs. And when we embark on modernization of our schools, we must take the opportunity to make our schools green. And we can save millions in energy costs and protect the air and water of the community uses, and create climate resilient spaces for students, teachers, staff, and neighbors. And finally, the school rebuilding process must be under public control, guided by leaders who are accountable to Philadelphians. And we have seen that putting public responsibilities into private hands can have disastrous consequences for Philadelphians. So we need to ensure that the school modernization process is firmly in the public domain. If we keep these goals at the center of our efforts, I have no doubt that we will have a successful and just modernization process. And I'm looking forward to learning from so many esteemed experts and leaders today. And I'm excited to work alongside all of you as we make a healthy, green, and modern schools a reality for Philadelphia. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Brooks. Mr. Maynard, will you please call the first panel to testify here this morning?
Sure. The first witness we'll hear from is Kim Moores, Executive Director of RIBEC, an acronym she'll explain in a moment. After that, we'll hear from School Superintendent Dr. Tony Watlington.
Thank you, Mr. Maynard. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin with your testimony.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Kim Moores. I am the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Health and Educational Building Corporation. It's important to me that you all understand that I speak only on behalf of RIBEC. I'm not an elected official. So Executive Director of a quasi-state agency here in Rhode Island. and I will read from my written testimony. Rybec is a quasi-state agency that serves as the conduit bond issuer for nonprofit educational institutions, healthcare entities, and other 501c3s. Rybec is also the issuer of bonds for public school construction projects, which clearly is the nexus to your endeavor. The state of Rhode Island does not fund Rybec's operations. Rather, we charge fees on most of our programs. In this state, the School Building Authority, or SBA, is a department of the State of Rhode Island Department of Education, otherwise known as RIDE. If a school district in Rhode Island wants
money, of course.
I'm sorry?
Can everybody please mute yourself? Please, all participants, please mute yourself. Please mute yourself. You may continue with your testimony.
Thank you. If a school district in Rhode Island wants to receive any kind of state aid for school construction projects, it must have its projects reviewed and approved by the School Building Authority. Again, that is part of the Department of Education here in the state and independent of Rybec, my organization. There are various forms of state aid for school construction projects, but the largest one is called housing aid, and it is a subsidy of debt service on bonds that are issued to finance school construction projects. In order to be eligible for housing aid, a school district must have its projects vetted and approved by the School Building Authority, and it must issue its bonds through Rybec. Otherwise, it will forego the housing aid. In its capacity as bond issuer for school districts and school projects, Rybec assists school districts with the selection of underwriters, bond counsel, trustee, other kinds of financing team participants. The resulting financing team works together to draft documents, official statements, set a schedule, etc., to bring the bond issue to market, and then to close the bonds that finance the school construction projects. In partnership with the SBA, Rybec also administers all state aid to school districts. All state aid is funded by either an appropriation of state general funds or an allocation of Rhode Island state GO bonds. All of this aid flows through Rybec such that upon approval from the SBA of a state grant, Rybec will draw down on funds received from the state in order to fund the approved grant. This process is audited annually by Rybec's financial auditor in conjunction with our regular financial audit. The above funding mechanism for school construction projects evolved over time, in fact, since 2006, well before I was hired, which was 2018. And this process has been overlaid or was overlaid on two pre-existing independent entities, namely Rybec and the School Building Authority. And the two of us have essentially had to make it work. However, if the funding mechanism had been created from scratch, it is my belief that operational and financial efficiencies would have been gained by housing the SBA functions and the Rybec public school related functions under the same entity. That entity would have had the singular goal of improving public school facilities. All personnel of this entity would have job responsibilities that would be aligned to that goal and would report to the same executive leader who ensures that job performances are working toward that common goal. One department of this entity would be the equivalent of the SBA as noted above, including its vetting and approval of construction projects and plans, along with the ongoing monitoring of construction projects as they are built through a requisition approval process. The other area of this entity is the financing arm, assisting with access to the bond market as noted above, closing bonds, and then working with SBA to ensure bond proceeds are spent in accordance with the approved project. So again, it is my belief that if this had been conceived a little bit better, the two functions, Rybec and the SBA, would have been housed under a single entity. So that is my written statement. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your statement. I definitely have some questions. We wanted to allow you to go first because we know you have a time constraint. At least that's what I was told.
Yes, I appreciate that. Thank you.
We have our superintendent up next. So he's in a similar situation. So if I can allow the superintendent to testify next, and then after that, any questions from members of the committee, we could ask to both of our panelists, if everybody's okay with that. Dr. Watlington?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. With your permission, I'd like to call on Board President Streeter. He's going to lead us off as this has been a topic of his board. Board President Streeter.
Absolutely. President Streeter, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Hello, everybody, and good morning. I want to thank Chair Thomas, Vice President Brooks, and the full membership of the Education Committee for inviting the Board of Education and School District of Philadelphia to provide testimony at this morning's hearing. This summer, the district is actively hard at work preparing our school buildings for a safe and successful first day of school on September 5th. In fact, our back to school celebration and bus tour kicked off this past Monday. Also, last Friday, I'm proud to say we graduated more than 350 students who completed their secondary coursework over the summer. We are very proud of these students for meeting the finish line and achieving this monumental accomplishment. However, today we are here to discuss the modernization of our school buildings, which is a critically important priority for the district and for this board. The issue of facilities is one that takes up a lot of our time, but later in the superintendent's presentation, we are excited to share some substantive updates and timelines. The purpose of my opening remarks are to briefly do three things. One, frame historically some of the factors that have influenced the district's current facility conditions. Two, preview that the district has not sat and will not sit idly by on its hands regarding its facilities while the village comes together, because our students deserve pragmatic urgency. And three, proclaim that the district is standing ready to accept any and all productive, constructive, public-private partnerships that will ensure that our learners have access to the 21st century facilities we know are a necessary tool to deliver on the strategic academic plan and for what our students deserve and what our city deserves. Above all, we are here in the spirit of optimism and as being a part of the collective village. We know the Commonwealth's unconstitutionally inadequate funding has held the district back from giving our scholars the learning environments they deserve. Unfortunately, this is evidenced by a 2017 report that found more than $4.5 billion in deferred building maintenance. That is, of course, in 2017 dollars. Planning and construction costs have only risen over the last 6 years, regrettably. However, despite these challenges, the district has made strides in upgrading facilities and ensuring safe learning environments, but we know we have much work to do. Our issues are not unique to public education, but are a symptom of a national disinvestment in cities and in infrastructure. I think the district buildings should not be isolated as just a Philly district and or board issue, but I think it correlates with the topic of infrastructure in America. For example, according to the American Society of Civil Engineers 2021 report card, there's approximately $2.6 trillion in deferred maintenance across the nation. This did not occur overnight. While the operating and capital costs of public education are not included in this estimate, Philadelphia, once affectionately called the workshop of the world, one of the preeminent manufacturing hubs on earth, had the tax revenue to erect our city hall and some of our beautiful citadels of learning, such as Overbrook, Frankfurt, my alma mater, Germantown High School, Simon Gratz, just to name a few. You're probably wondering, why does this even matter? Why does this history lesson matter? I believe it matters because I often say everything we need to supercharge the current public educational renaissance happening right now in Philly has been and is currently substantially right here in the Commonwealth and in our city. It just takes the will, which I believe our chair and our co-chair and city council is showing, and our mayor, leadership, and yes, capital to maintain and offer the stellar educational experiences we know our learners deserve via their human and rights, which are contemplated in opulent citadels mentioned above were constructed. We did it before, and I know we will do it again. With that said, as Superintendent Watlington will share in a few moments, we are waiting on the sidelines for help. In fact, we are hard at work identifying and bringing on the proper internal and external technical and community engagement expertise to deliver on our needs. As evidenced by today's hearing, the board and district stand ready to participate in any and all opportunities to accelerate the upgrading and management of our facilities. This includes efforts already underway and any new efforts that emerge moving forward. I often say it takes a village to provide our young people with the experiences they deserve and desperately need. I would argue that one of the most important things our village will provide our children, we will provide, is a safe, welcoming, and happy place to learn. For those unfamiliar, the board has adopted goals and guardrails as its governance framework. The 4 guardrails are the non-negotiable conditions that must exist in every schools. Importantly, our first guardrail is centered on facilities, because we know, and we knew when we created them, that buildings that should be built for learning as an environment for our students to learn are a critical ingredient to all students imagining and realizing any future they desire. Moreover, the superintendent recently launched a strategic plan, Accelerate Philly, and it is in part predicated on our infrastructure, whether it be year-round schools, pools, AP science courses that require labs, grade configurations, or reimagination of those. Our buildings matter. In closing, I want to thank the committee for creating the space for us to come together and imagine and realize deeper collaboration and partnership on this issue. I look forward to the testimony of the other speakers, and at this time, I would like to pass it to Superintendent Watlington and his team to provide additional information on the state of the district infrastructure, some things to consider with a Philadelphia Building Authority, and additional models that have been successful right here in our city. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Board President Streeter. Chair Thomas, I'm joined today as the team pulls up a PowerPoint deck. I just want to say thank you to you for having us here this morning. I am joined by our Chief Operations Officer, Colonel Oz Hill, and our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Mike Herbstman. They will assist me in this presentation with this testimony this morning. Next slide, please. We're pleased to be here to share information about conversations about an independent school building authority related to the hearing. I do want to say that echo what Board President Streeter just said. We've not been sitting idly on the sidelines this summer. We've been working hard to get our schools open and ready for our students on the first day, to make sure that our Frankfort students have in-person learning on September 5, the first day of school. Make sure our children are welcome to welcome to clean and tidy buildings that are where the materials are ready for them on day one. So we're excited about the upcoming school year. As we move to the next slide, I want to give you an overview of what we'll share today. President Streeter just gave us a very comprehensive and clear overview of why we're here and set the context for this testimony. We are going to share the state of our infrastructure. We're just going to remind you about that Parsons report that we had several years ago, as well as the facility condition assessments that where our schools all got a ranking and a rating, a green, yellow, red marks from. We'll talk about some of the the challenges, what we're doing over the next 5 years relative to improving facilities, and provide some facilities planning updates. I'll ask Chief Hill and CFO Herbstman to also assist me with some information around considerations for a school building authority for Philadelphia. And we'll also share some other models to accelerate improvement. We're pleased to be asked to provide this testimony, Mr. Chairman, while we have not landed on a position on what the district should or should not do. We do know that A, great organizations do not hide problems, and B, we know that our children and families deserve us taking the opportunity to put all options on the table so that we can figure out what is the best path forward, Mr. Chairman, in the best interest of our city and community. Next slide, please. I want to spend some time sharing about the state of the School District of Philadelphia's infrastructure. Next slide. By way of background, as you've heard from us before, we have some 300 buildings in the school district that were constructed or repaired during a time when it was common for lead-based paint and asbestos to be a part of building materials. That includes floor tiles, pipe insulation, roof flashings, and some paint and cement products. I can't stress enough that environmental conditions are now a factor for every facilities department. from funding, training, staffing, to making some really hard and difficult choices about how to balance the ever-growing needs with insufficient resources. I also want to just remind you that the average age of our school facilities are 73 years old, and you can see some of the fine schools here in the pictures there. Next slide, please. I want to remind you about that 2017 Parsons Facility Conditions Assessment Report. It found the overall facilities condition index is 32.4%, which indicates that we should be actively replacing systems at these facilities. It pointed to an estimated $4.5 billion in deferred building maintenance costs. School buildings are no different than our homes and our automobiles. If you don't keep them up, they cost you more downstream to repair them. 85 buildings in the school district should be considered for major renovation, not just cosmetic, but major renovation, according to that 2017 report. And the report recommended that 21 of our school facilities should be considered for either closure or replacement. We're currently doing some work to update this 2017 study so that we can validate the data so that we have more current information, although the overall breadth of the information is still very valuable to us some 6 years later. Next slide, please. Every school received a facility condition assessment. In this industry, it's a process where a qualified group of individuals or trained industry professionals conduct a detailed analysis of each school facility. And our school facilities, as you know, they vary based on age, design, when they were built, what kind of construction materials were used, and the like. This comprehensive assessment, though, of educational facilities and in other areas are operated by the School District of Philadelphia. You can see a green, light green, yellow, orange, or red rating. It ranges from 90 to below 60. And you can see the conditions, the facility condition assessment ranks these facilities as new or like new, good, fair, poor, all the way down to unsatisfactory. Certainly, if you're in the red category, unsatisfactory, the building and a majority of the system should be replaced, according to the facility condition assessment. Next slide. Bottom line, Mr. Chairman, if we ask the question, how do we create those safe, healthy, and welcoming school environments that Board President Streeter referenced in the board's goals and guardrails? The Parsons report told us in 2017 that in 2017 dollars, the cost to upgrade our school facilities across the board would be $7.789 billion, at least in 2017 dollars, and that cost will certainly be higher today. Next slide. I'm going to ask Chief Hill to walk us through some of the environmental challenges and next steps, and he'll do slides number 9 through 12, and I'll come back, Chief Hill, right after that to jump into slide 13. Good morning, Colonel Hill. You're on mute, sir. Colonel, you're on mute.
Good morning, Council Member Thomas. Thank you, Dr. Watlington and Board President Streeter. As Dr. Watlington mentioned, an ongoing challenge the district confronts are the environmental issues that are prevalent in our schools due to the age of the buildings, the materials that were commonly accepted for use at the time of construction, and the historic trends of underfunding our facilities. The possibility of encountering environmental challenges must be considered in every aspect of facility care and maintenance, as well as capital projects. Management of environmental issues requires ongoing increases in the district's capacity for inspection and management of facility environmental issues, diligence in compliance with laws and regulatory mandates, resources to upgrade technology and staffing requirements, and the persistent fierce sense of urgency that is being demonstrated by the district and its collaborative partners at all echelons of government, as well as in the private sector. Although the district has improved its proactive posture in identifying environmental issues through refined inspection procedures, the momentum of the response in addressing issues is deliberate, and sometimes the pace is slowed to ensure the safety and well-being of the school community as the remediation work is accomplished. As many are aware, environmental issues have resulted in schools being closed temporarily to allow the remediation work to be accomplished safely. In those instances, the students have been relocated to an available swing space to continue in-person instruction. The district has developed a swing space master plan to streamline and accelerate the process of returning to in-person instruction as expediently as possible. Slide, please. The district has made significant investments in its facilities with the available resources. However, there is an indisputable acknowledgement that more must be done to address this crisis. Slide. Over the course of the past 10 years, the district has placed emphasis on targeted investments in our facilities to support the accomplishment of academic programming goals in the area of new construction to address capacity challenges and infrastructure deficiencies, which include building Solace Cohen Elementary School, Northeast Community Propel Academy, the initiation of construction at T.M. Pierce School and Ethan Allen, as well as the project at Lincoln Field. Life safety has enhancements, major mechanical systems upgrades, and energy efficiency initiatives, which include replacing fire alarm systems, replacing boilers, chillers, piping, and electrical systems have also been undertaken. There have been educational enhancements, which include elementary classroom renovations, career technical education programming expansion, science and music lab upgrades, as well as playground and athletic field improvements. There have also been modernization of technology and business systems, which include investments in information technology infrastructure for improved networking, school security systems, and the modernization of our yellow bus fleet with electric buses. Major renovations have been completed or are in the final stage of completion at Forest, Pollock, Anne Frank, Mayfair, Richmond, Shallcross, Meehan, Rhodes, Pratt, and Dobbins, as well as a host of classroom modernization projects across the districts. To address environmental issues, lead-based paint inspections and stabilization projects have been completed in 194 schools, and the ongoing and ever-present Asbestos Hazard Emergency Response Act, or AHERA, 3-year inspections have been completed in 294 schools, with the 6-month AHERA surveillance inspections to follow. And to date, we have installed 1,819 state-of-the-art hydration systems to ensure safe and drinking water for our school community. This is 82% of the district's goal to have 2,219 hydration stations installed by 2025. As you can see, we are ahead of the pace to achieve that goal. Slide, please. The current capital improvement plan allocates almost $2.5 billion to improve our facilities, which includes the completion of the new construction projects at T.M. Pierce, Ethan Allen, Cassidy, as well as new construction programs for Thomas Home and alternative middle years at James Martin. There are more than 30 major renovations, minor renovations, which include interior doors, bathroom renovations, and science lab upgrades. Also included in the CIP are electrical upgrades, which will enable improvements in heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, as well as a broad range of other facility enhancing projects. I'll be followed by Dr. Watlington with an overview of the facilities planning process.
Thank you, Colonel. Next slide, please. Chair Thomas, you invited us earlier in the spring and asked us to provide an update, not just on where we are with facilities planning, but you charged us to make sure that we're moving with all deliberate speed such that we don't continue to kick this can down the road. We heard that feedback loud and clear. We've heard Board President Streeter and the Board of Education, and so we've been very busy this summer. I want to give you an update on where we are. Next slide, please. Since the last time we talked to you, want to tell you what the 3 phases are that we've concluded on to get this project concluded by the close of this upcoming 2023-24 school year. Phase 1 of this work for a facilities plan, a comprehensive long-range facilities master plan, was to first develop a strategic plan and an academic vision for achieving the board's goals and guardrails and making sure that our kids, our young people, our scholars get the academic program that they need so that they can go out and participate in the world's largest economy. Does no good to have the best facilities if you can't have a good academic plan to make sure that kids are learning and are prepared to participate in the economy. And so in December, we paused the facilities planning process for a time so that we could prioritize getting that academic plan. Understand that there were those who disagreed with whether it was important or necessary to do so, and I certainly respect that feedback that we received. We picked that work up back in earnest during the second semester, and we came before your committee, Chair Thomas, on March 21st, I believe it was, to provide an update on where we were at that time, and more importantly, how we intend to get to the finish line. On June 1st, the Board of Education unanimously approved our new 5-year strategic plan entitled Accelerate Philly. When we implement well, this plan will lead us to significant improvement. Now, in year 1, while we were developing the plan, we weren't just asleep at the wheel, and this team of principals, teachers, and district staff worked really hard. What were the outcomes? In year 1, even before the strategic plan was complete, student attendance rose by 3 percentage points. That's the percentage of students who are in school 90% of the year, increased from 57 to 60%. The percentage of teachers who had 90% attendance rate or higher increased from 77 to 84%. And the number of students who dropped out of school went down by 265 students. We have a lot of work to do, but I sure want to make sure to commend the staff and the team and our parents and students for the work they did this year to begin to improve outcomes. And we look forward to coming back to sharing the testing data once it's verified by the state in reading and math in the next couple of months. And we also put together, as soon as that strategic plan was approved by the Board of Education on June 1, we brought a smaller committee together to really drill down to the academic division to say, what are the top 3 to 5 things that a project team should keep right in front of them as we think about how to repair, rebuild, and improve all of our school facilities here in the School District of Philadelphia. And so that committee is looking at things like, what do we need to do differently with pre-K in our buildings so that our kids get the education they need? What do we need to do differently so that at the middle grades level, no matter where you live in the city of Philadelphia, in middle school you have access to take Algebra 1, because we know it's a gateway to who gets into the best math classes, who gets into college. What do we need to do differently with our facilities so that all of our schools can offer advanced placement courses? We have 16 high schools, I learned this year, that have 0 advanced placement courses. No matter what we do, we are not preparing our children, all of our children, to participate in the economy. And then career and technical education. Where do we need to make better investments? What do we make to make different investments in our career and technical education, in our vocational education programs? So that team has been working all summer long so that as we launch phase 2, we will have a finalized academic vision that we can hand right over to this project team. Also, in April of this year, we pulled out the Parsons report, and under Chief Oz Hills' leadership, we've been reviewing that data, those facility index scores for all the schools, red, yellow, greens, and we've been building some partnerships with some external experts so that we can validate the data. We want to validate that Parsons report from 2017. What still is accurate 6 years later? What has changed? And so we wanted to make sure we fully understood that. So that's work that's been occurring since April. It's not complete yet. And so we put the timeline to complete that work as to be determined because we needed 2 or 3 more weeks before we can know when we can really bring closure to that part of the process. The most important phase of this work is phase 3, which we're launching this month with the project team that will develop a master facilities plan. And this work, Chairman Thomas, I hope you're pleased to know we're on record now that we will complete this by June of 2024. Part of that includes staffing up the facilities project team with internal and external stakeholders. We are currently identifying some of the phases that will need to be sub-phases and mapping out the work over the next 12 months. And we're preparing for a community engagement program because we've heard very clearly from President Street and the board that it's committed to make sure that our community understands this work and that they are regularly updated on our thinking. So 3 phases of work here. Next slide, please. As a part of this, Chair Thomas, this is a new graphic that shows you the structure for this project team. As you can see, we've got this project team will work under the leadership of the Board of Education and the superintendent. Internal to the district, Colonel Hill will be one co-chair of this team, and then we'll working to identify 2 external people outside of the district to kind of co-chair with Chief Hill. We're looking for someone who has really strong technical knowledge about aging facilities and best practices of how you mitigate and respond to those issues. We're also looking for an external co-chair who is well respected in the city of Philadelphia, who brings the full breadth of experience and a reputation as someone who's trusted in this city, who can also be an ambassador for this work. Underneath those chairs, we'll have a project team of internal and external stakeholders. On one side of the house, they'll be advised by a group of consultants. As we have existing budgets and resources to enlist the support of those individuals. For example, the topic we're talking about today might be something that consultants can help us to think about. On the other side of that project team, you'll see advisory groups. The superintendent has an advisory group of students. We have a teacher advisory group, a principal advisory group. We want to be very thoughtful about how we engage cross sections of parents across the city, grassroots organizations, and others. So we know that how we communicate and are transparent about the work that we'll be doing this school year is just as important as the outcomes that we reach by June of 2024. So what's the charge to the project team? The team's charge will be to develop a comprehensive facilities master plan by June 30. We're on the clock, and we know the clock has started. What does that mean? It means that we are going to share the academic vision with the project team, and we want the project team to embrace that academic vision as set forth in our strategic plan, Accelerate Philly. Number 2, we want the project team to develop the guiding principles for how we will go about the business of designing state-of-the-art learning environments. 3, we want the project team to co-construct a vision for modernizing school facilities throughout the city. And we want to do it in a way that we're talking with our community all along the way. So this is going to be an action-packed, very exciting school year. And number 3, we want to reimagine the use of space and physical plant to improve the functionality of schools. So we're not thinking narrow, we're thinking big. So as we think about school facilities, we're thinking about what's the opportunity for multiple uses of school. Not limited to just doing.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, Superintendent. I really don't want to interrupt you, but please, everyone, make sure you mute yourself if you're not talking. And since I did interrupt you, let me just take a moment to acknowledge that Councilmember Phillips has joined the hearing. I'm so sorry, Dr. Watlington. I apologize.
So no problem at all, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we just know that we are dreaming big, and we're thinking about a number of things that we'll put on the plate of this project team so that we're not just thinking about our traditional schoolhouse anymore. We're thinking about reimagining the uses of spaces so that these schools become true community hubs. And so I don't want to get ahead of the work of the project team, but just please underscore that word, reimagine the use of space and physical plant in our schools as a part of this project teamwork. Next slide. As you've introduced the topic earlier, Chair Thomas, we're here to talk about considering a school building authority for Philadelphia. I do want to say that we appreciate the opportunity to be a part of the discussion. And while, and I'll say what I said at the beginning, great organizations do not hide problems. It's no secret that we've got significant facility challenges in the school district of Philadelphia. On the one hand, we have historic underfunding. On the other hand, though, I want everyone to realize and to acknowledge the work that is occurring. Chief Hill ticked off some really impressive work that folks are doing. So I don't want it to be lost on us that the staff in the operations area is not just sitting on their hands and saying, woe is us. They're out building new schools, renovating spaces, and they're doing the best they can to be good stewards of the tax dollars that they have. In fact, Mr. Chairman, I would be remiss if I didn't say the district is doing some things very well. In fact, the Board of Education learned earlier this year that we have the best, not only the best credit rating, Moody's credit investment rating that we've had in the past 40 years. It was upgraded again this year from stable to positive. And so that is a really significant point that I don't want to be lost on us, notwithstanding all the challenges we have. However, given all the challenges we have, I'm very proud of our Board of Education for willing to be a part of putting all the options on the table, because we need to put all those options on the table and we need to vet them, even though we're not necessarily endorsing one over the other just yet. Relative to a building authority, on the next slide, there are some issues to consider. I'll just highlight a couple of these before I turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Mike Herbstman, to talk in more detail. Certainly, school building authorities can be successful. They have been successful in some places when they've been adequately and thoroughly funded. There are places that have done a good job of this, and quite frankly, in the United States, I'm aware of places that have not done as good a job with this. It's like everything else, the devil is in the details. It requires a central state government partnership, and program oversight is really important. It requires a broad coalition and not this side versus that side, because there has to be, it has to be inclusive of public and private stakeholders. And it can't be subject to political and economic changing winds. There has to be things, here are some things that we can come together and agree with. And funding has to be allocated for not less than 10 years to include strategic planning and planning around programming for academic needs and the capital construction of new schools. But it's an interesting, appropriate topic to be on the table today for testimony. And I'd like to introduce our Chief Financial Officer, Mike Herbstman, who has experience not just in Prince George's County, Maryland, one of the largest school districts in the country, but also in the third largest school district in the country, the Chicago Public Schools. So good morning, Chief Herbstman.
Hey, Dr. Wallington, I'm sorry. Before we go into the finances, first of all, your testimony so far has been, you and the entire team has been extremely informative, and I know that the general public appreciates all the information. I know we talk about this stuff consistently, but it's good for the public to hear it. Ms. Morris, our first panelist on this particular panel, actually has a hard stop coming soon. So I just want to take a couple moments to be able to ask her any questions that members of this committee may have before you close out your testimony, so we can assure that we don't lose her. Is that okay with you, Dr. Wallington?
Yes, sir. And then Chief Herbst is going to just share a couple of other slides whenever you're ready that give some context for the building authority.
We'll go right back to the chief as soon as we allow for questions for Ms. Morris. Ms. Morris, are you still here with us? Are you still?
I'm here, and thank you I appreciate you recognizing my time constraint.
Sure, no problem. So if any members of the committee has any questions, please feel free to. I know I see a couple people queued up in the chat feature. I'm assuming that was for our superintendent, but if anyone has any questions for Ms. Morris, I see Councilmember Gaudier has questions, so I'll let her go first. And if there aren't any other questions besides Councilmember Gaudier, I'll close out with a few questions for you, Ms. Morris, and then we'll jump right back into the school district presentation. Chair recognizes Councilmember Gaudier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also have questions for Dr. Watlington, but I'll hold them. Ms. Morris, I just wanted you to clarify the difference between RIBEC and the School Building Authority. I was a little confused by that. If you could just clarify what both entities do and why both entities were formed.
So RIBEC was formed originally with the mission of helping 501c3 healthcare and educational institutions, so not-for-profit universities, K through 12 institutions, hospitals, healthcare, other healthcare entities, access the tax-exempt market. This is under the actual federal government IRS code that 501c3s must issue through a governmental entity in order to be able to issue tax-exempt bonds or benefit from tax-exempt bonds. So that was RIBEC's original mission. We were created in 1966 with that mission. In 2006, the Rhode Island State Legislature recognized the need for some financing oversight of school construction projects. So it inserted RIBEC. So heretofore, RIBEC had only been involved in not-for-profit financings. And in 2006, the legislature said, we would like RIBEC to oversee the school construction, the public school construction financings, not the projects, but the financings. So along the way, and forgive me because I've been in this role for 5 years, so I don't have the history down pat. But the School Building Authority was created in that time frame, right around there, under the recognition that those school construction projects needed more oversight. That maybe school districts were going a little bit crazy with, their school plans, had big dreams, but they couldn't afford them, or whatever the case might have been. They needed oversight. So the School Building Authority was created under a state department. Okay, RIBEC is not part of the state. We're independent of the state, even though we're state legislated. We are not a line item in the state's budget. School Building Authority is in the state's budget, part of the Rhode Island Department of Education. So on the one hand, you have School Building Authority with the oversight of the construction projects specifically. And on the other hand, you have RIBEC inserted in 2006 specifically for the financing component of the projects. So now the two completely independent entities work together specifically on public school construction projects.
Why wasn't the SBA charged with the financial oversight? Do you know that?
I do not.
Okay.
Thank
you so much.
School Building Authority being a part of the state of Rhode Island, and the state of Rhode Island having its own Treasury Department and debt management group, could have done the oversight of school construction projects. Maybe you're familiar with weird politics in Philadelphia, but
yes, we are.
I can only attribute it to some ulterior motive, some strange political agenda that Rybeck was inserted into that process, but it well predates me.
Thank you for that clarification. That's helpful. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for your testimony. And I just had two specific questions, and I guess we could even answer these later, but basic was this sustainability plan for the district and how we would propose that. And are we looking to transition away from fossil fuels over time as part of that plan?
Councilmember Squilla, I'm sorry. We want to. I wanted to let questions from Ms. Morris happen first because she has a hard stop, and then we want to allow the district to finish their presentation, and then I was going to open it up for questions for the district. But Ms. Morris,
that's fine. Yeah,
we're over her time. She actually has to go probably as of a couple minutes ago.
I know you had a question yourself, so please, I can take a few more minutes.
Yeah. I'll be very quick. I just want to know two things. I think first and foremost, if you can give us numbers, how much money has Rhode Island spent on facilities and how many new schools have you built? And then also, based on the information that you've heard thus far today and based on your experience, what recommendations do you have for us as it relates to the direction that we should go in, looking at the facilities crisis we have in collaboration with the idea of assuring that every child has to get a quality education? Clearly, we're exploring the idea of having a separate party be responsible for the construction of new buildings. So my two questions would be, again, can you give us some information as it relates to what you've been able to accomplish in Rhode Island? And based on what you've heard today, what recommendations do you have for us?
So honestly, I don't mean to sort of cop out, but those questions really are appropriately asked of the school building authority. They are the ones who keep all of the statistics related to how many schools have been built, how much. We had something conducted called the Jacobs Report, kind of like your Parsons, I think it was called, report that looked Rhode Island statewide, what needed to be done. I think that the number in there was something like $6 billion. I don't have any of that memorized, but I do know that Rybeck since 2006 has issued well over $2 billion in tax-exempt bonds to benefit public schools. So that doesn't necessarily encompass the total need. That looks back at the history of the program. But again, would encourage you strongly to speak to someone at the school building authority for specific statistics on how many schools have been built, what the total cost has been, and what the current and future need is. They keep track of that. I do the financing component of it. So I can speak to the tax exempt market, to the bonds that we've done. And I also feel supremely underqualified to make a recommendation to you all, other than to say that my observation in the 5 years that I've been in this role is that if this program had been originally conceived a little bit better, without any political agenda or whatever was happening at the time, that the school building authority and the financing component that Rybeck does for the schools should all be housed under the same roof, under the same leadership, under the same agency.
Well, that's helpful insight. So thank you for that information. And we appreciate your time, your effort to the children of Rhode Island, and we appreciate you being here today. So thank you.
You have a monumental task, but it is worth it. I've seen a lot of improvements in schools in Rhode Island. So I wish you all the very best.
Thank you.
And thank you for having me.
Thank you. Superintendent, Dr. Waddington, we'll pass it back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'll ask Chief Hirschman to walk us through the last few slides. Chief, good morning.
Thank you. Good morning. As we discuss the concept of a new facilities authority today, we just wanted to briefly touch on 3 other models already used by the school district in recent years to accelerate construction of new school buildings. Next slide, please. So currently the school district is collaborating with the Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation, PIDC. I do understand that a representative of PIDC will be testifying later today and will likely provide far more detail than I'm about to. But as you are aware, PIDC manages the Philadelphia Authority for Industrial Development, or PAID. In March 2022, the Board of Education authorized a partnership with PAID for 3 specific school sites: Amy 5 at James Martin, Thomas Home Elementary, and Lewis C. Cassidy Elementary. The intent of this partnership was really to provide an additional efficiency and to help accelerate the timelines of these projects. In this model, the school district continues to own the sites through intergovernmental cooperation agreements. The district leases these properties to PAID through the end of construction. PAID in turn subleases each property to a developer, procured through a joint process that includes both PAID and the district. The developer designs and constructs the buildings. Throughout construction, PAID manages invoicing and payment to the developers. The projects are, of course, required to meet the design guidelines, educational specifications, and technical specifications developed by the school district. In this particular case, these 3 projects are funded through ARPA ESSER, the latest round of the federal COVID-19 relief funding to schools. And PAID's total administrative services fees are capped at 1% of the project costs. I understand that members are likely familiar with this model, as I believe similar models in partnership with PAID have been used for other City of Philadelphia capital projects. Next slide, please. The school district used turnkey development to build the Northeast Community Propel Academy, one of the projects that Chief Hill mentioned earlier. SDP owned the land adjacent to Lincoln High School, as was authorized to do by the Board of Education in 2019. It sold the land to a developer with the express purpose of that developer developing and building a new K-8 school and athletic fields. There was an agreement at the beginning of the process that after the development was satisfactorily complete, the district would purchase back the property, including the buildings and fields, at a not to exceed amount. That final amount had to be supported by 2 post-construction appraisals attained by the district before we did purchase it back in, I believe, 2021. Construction was financed by the developer through the end of construction. And at the end of the process, when it was time to purchase the property back, the district used bond funding for the proceeds to finally repurchase the land, buildings, and fields. Next slide. In 2019, the school district originally entered into a public-private agreement with Drexel University. Drexel constructed a school building for Powell Elementary School and Science Leadership Academy Middle School. For the construction, SDP, the school district, contributed $7 million to construction. The state contributed $3 million from the Redevelopment Assistance Capital Program. And the rest was paid by a combination of Drexel University, with the assistance of some federal tax credits and support of several philanthropic organizations. There's currently a 35-year agreement. It started when the school district, when the building was finalized and accepted by the school district. It is an agreement where the district leases the building for $1 per month. And the district continues to pay to fully operate the facilities that we're using currently for Powell Elementary and Science Leadership Academy Middle School. Moving on to the next slide, I will turn the presentation back to the superintendent for some closing remarks.
Thank you, Chief Herbst. Mr. Chairman, that concludes our presentation. Again, we thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Board President Streeter and the entire team over at the school district. I do have a couple questions. I'm going to ask one or two now, then I'll open it up to my colleagues and I'll close out with a few as well. In the midst of your presentation today, you talked about 3 different examples of how the school district had worked with other parties to provide new facilities in the city of Philadelphia. Your 2017 report said that we needed at least 21, that 21 schools should be closed, not necessarily saying we need to build 21 new schools based on population shifts and other studies. I think that will determine exactly where and what new schools need to be built. But I did see here 3 different examples. I heard one model that had a public-private partnership where you work with Drexel and some philanthropy groups. I heard another model where you sold the land to a developer and the school district purchased the land back. And I heard another model that involved PIDC. I think most folks are clear where I am as it relates to the direction that I think we should go in to build new facilities. I think the public-private partnerships are great, but with the 35-year expiration deadline, that does have a little concern, and that lingers over my head when we use that model. I'm a big fan of the model of working with PIDC and having an entity or somebody, the equivalence of them, participate in this process with us, because I feel like it's very difficult to ask you to assure that every child gets to school safe, receives a quality education, they're safe when they're there, they have a nutritious meal, they have out of school time activities after that, and then they transition home from that safe. And you probably have one of the biggest school districts in the entire country. So to add the idea of building new buildings to all of those responsibilities, I think is asking a lot as it relates to the capacity for the district. And so with that being said, based on the 3 models that you presented today, anybody could answer this. It could be our superintendent, it could be our board president. What model do you favor and why?
If I may start, certainly, Mr. Chairman, I recognize that boards of education are responsible for both vision, policy, and budgets for school districts. I would never want to get ahead of the board and the board president. We've not landed on any firm recommendations that we will offer to President Streeter at this point. What we want to do is do a careful consideration and a thorough vetting of all options on the table. What I can say with certainty is we're committed to getting this project team work done and concluded by June 30, 2024. Not sure exactly what we would recommend at this point, but I would defer to the board president for further comment.
Yeah, I'll add my personal perspective. The board hasn't sat in the room yet and said, do we prefer PIDC paid turnkey model as well? But I think if the paid PIDC piece works, and it is working, that's something I think that we can build upon as well. So, and that's just me speaking, individual board member. I think I feel the temperature of the board on this, but I think the PIDC pay model, because it does a couple of things. One, we know that there's experts who know how to build things, and it helps the district focus on educating children, work orders, the other things that we have to do to make sure that our buildings stay open. In the hands of an entity that we know, because it's done work for the city with large capital projects, can do the work. So I think that's right now, that seems like the optimal mechanism of what we have right now. But that's the fact.
Thank you, board president. And I just want to be clear for the listening public. The board president isn't necessarily saying this is the direction we should go in. I think the purpose of today's conversation is to explore ideas, suggestions, and recommendations as it relates to an issue that we're facing and what we can do to essentially resolve it. So I appreciate you providing your opinion, even though it's not like an official opinion from the school board or the school district of Philadelphia. With that being said, just one more question, and then I'll pass it to my colleagues. In the 2007 report, you talked about 85 schools needing major construction and 21 schools that were recommended to be closed. And this is just a personal question. Where was Frankfurt at on that list? Was Frankfurt one of the 80? It clearly had to be at least one of the 85. But I'm wondering, was it one of the 21, or at any time was Frankfurt one of the schools, or any school that we're in right now? What was any school that we're using right now, where young people are actively there, where teachers and other staff members are actively there? Is any school that was on that 21 list of schools that needed to be closed? Are we using any of those schools still right now today, some 6 years later?
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to defer to Chief Hill because I don't have the report in front of me, but if my memory is correct, and that's always a dangerous thing, I do not believe that Frankfurt was on that list of 21. Is that correct?
Yeah, let me add some context. Yes, I agree. From my memory as well, I do not believe Frankfurt was on that list. But to answer your other question, of the 21 schools, I believe one of those schools might be on the precipice of being replaced or will be replaced very soon with the rebuild. But there are a few of those schools that sadly are on that list of either closure or replacement.
So when you create, and I want to be clear to the listening public, when this report was done in 2017, most of the folks who are in the position that they're in right now, we were not in the positions that we're currently in. So this was a report that was done and issues that were created long before any of us got to the seats that we're at. So I don't want folks to think that we're just sitting on our hands as it relates to this issue. We're trying to rectify this stuff, and we talk all the time to figure out what are best plans and practices to try to address this. When you talk about, you know what, I'll stop right there. Chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla. I'll come back to my line of questions. Let me pass it to some of the other members of the Education Committee to allow them to ask questions that they may have. Chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla, and then after that, we'll recognize Councilmember Gotti. Oh, okay, I apologize. We'll go to Councilmember Gaudier. Chair recognizes Councilmember Gaudier, and then we'll come back to Councilmember Squilla.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Dr. Watlington, I was curious to know, in your presentation, you talked about doing sort of an updated review of the 2017 Parsons report. That report gave a $7.78 billion figure in terms of what we would need to do to bring our facilities up to date. Have you gotten to the point in your review where you have a new number?
We don't at this time have a definitive new number. One of the reasons why that phase 2 was listed from April through to be determined is because we don't want to say we'll have it definitely by this date and it takes us 2 days later. We'll have more to say about that as we get deeper into this work over the next 4 to 6 weeks. But at this point, we don't have a new definitive number to pin for the council.
Okay, thanks. And when you, the last sort of slide of your presentation, or one of the last slides, talked about how an authority would work best. And you stated that one of the things that will help it to work is having 10 years of capital up front. Do you have a sense of what that figure would be?
I'm not prepared to share a number at this point, but we could certainly take that as a homework assignment and come back and share more details at a later date.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember Gaudier. Chair recognizes Councilmember Squilla if he's available.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, the councilman had to step out for a moment.
Okay. Well, okay. So as we close out this section of our hearing here today, I just wanted to ask a couple other questions. When you look at some of your goals and guardrails priorities, Dr. Watlington, talk to us just maybe for a minute or so about capacity. Thinking about your staff, we understand a new curriculum has been purchased, which needs to be implemented. And all the responsibilities that you have just being in the seat as superintendent for 1 year. How has this process been going for you? And how much more would you be able to focus on issues related to academic achievement if the idea of facilities were not necessarily your primary responsibility? Because right now, at the end of the day, outside of, you're responsible for public safety. I mean, you're responsible for the safety of young people to and from school, academic achievement, climate, culture, and curriculum, hiring issues, contract negotiations. I probably could list about 30 other things that comes under your jurisdiction. I'm wondering, in your 1 year, how has it been going so far? And what, in your opinion, would it do for your workload if the idea of building new buildings wasn't directly under your jurisdiction as it relates to implementing a plan that the facilities, I can't remember the exact name you called it, but the facilities coalition that comes up with. So I want to be clear. No one's looking to say that the school district should not have a say-so in what schools should look like, where schools should be built, or anything like that. I think that would be a naive perspective to take. But at the end of the day, the idea of actually implementing the plan is what we're talking about, having a third party involved with. So we don't necessarily have to have that responsibility. We can rely on people who do that every single day. So Superintendent, the mic is yours.
All right, thank you. I'll try to answer that very, very directly. First, I always believe, and it's certainly proven true in my first year here as the superintendent, our greatest resource is our time and how we use it wisely and toward the goals that we're trying to reach. That said, I've been very pleased with a lot of hardworking team members. I don't think we get credit for the number of hardworking people who are doing good things. When I looked at that slide that Chief Hill ticked off about, and I was very pleased to say under the Board of Education's leadership, this is just not the company line here. I really mean this. When you look at 5 schools being built, plans for others, hydration stations being put in, and all the things that are being done, notwithstanding all the challenges we have here, it makes me optimistic that we can get better. That said, if I didn't believe that we need to also be thinking about how we use our time wisely, I certainly wouldn't be a part of this testimony conversation today. I think it's worthy of having a conversation about how all of us can do our work more efficiently. And I think all these options are something that merits some real serious consideration, although I've not landed on a position yet. But I do think that we should be talking about how I can use my time best, the team can be using its time best. I equally think we have to have equal conversation about what we're going to do about the historic underfunding, because no matter who manages these processes, if we don't get our arms around the historic underfunding, I think that we'll continue to be in a not so pleasant space. But I hope that's a straightaway answer.
Absolutely, and I think that we should put an exclamation point on that statement that you just made or highlighted or something. The historical underfunding of our schools here in the city of Philadelphia is a big part of the problem, and it created this hole that we all inherited when we received the positions that we have. And at the end of the day, I appreciate everyone's focus on trying our best to address this issue. Last question. I know news just came out recently as it relates to legislation that City Council passed, specifically around school facilities. Maybe it's the board president, maybe it's the superintendent, but talk a little bit about what you're legally allowed to say as it relates to this issue being resolved, and how we can anticipate working together to assure that facilities are safe, up to par, and prepare for our young people this fall. As you've been examining buildings throughout the course of the summer, give us a brief summary of some of the things that you found. I was also impressed with Mr. Hill's presentation. So clearly a lot of work has been done, but give us specific information around what you've done this summer specifically, right? Because at the end of the day, this problem is so big that there's a chance that a school could be tested in September or October, and we find something, and it puts us in a position where we have to create some type of alternative plan. And what I don't want is for the listening public to think that we spent our entire summer at the shore or on vacation and we weren't necessarily looking into some of the issues that we already know exist. So just for a second, talk a little bit about what we've done this summer, some of the issues that we found, how we've been able to rectify them, and how we feel pretty good about where we are as it relates to the legislation and how we're prepared to work together moving forward.
Well, I'll take the latter question first, and I'll come back to the settlement piece of the legislation, the lawsuit. So, we've been hard at work, the district, the board, as well as relates to swing spaces. So we want to we were thinking that we don't want to get caught in a situation where the facilities plan is coming to fruition, and there might be some above me now moments like environmental concerns or other things that can cause the school to close, but we don't have appropriate spaces for children to go to. So be able to look out for that. There'll be a swing space plan coming out where we've split the city into quadrants where parents and communities will have access to a growing list of swing spaces. While there's work to be done on some of them, there are some spaces more ready to go now than before. So that's something I've been working on hard. And I think that I would hope that that'll be something that we all can be proud about, so that we don't have a repeat of what happened at your alma mater where, we were kind of figuring out where to put students and things like that, but have to have something in the front end where parents and families and schools can actually have, before there's a move, if one is necessary, to know where children are going to go. Also, this whole idea of the facilities planning process, right? This takes a lot of work. And make no mistake that this is not full. What we present today might evolve a little bit. We're definitely going to reach out to stakeholders, for suggestions and things like that. But we do think it's our role to kind of lead and take ownership of an issue that is ours in a way, but also look at the village as well as helping us with adding capacity and things like that. But as it relates to the, and then as also for Frankfort, I actually went to Frankfort myself and saw the work that the district did to get the wings, I think it was the D wing of the school up in a way where I believe the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade would be located there, and also where our ninth graders would be located at Clemente. So, and then I got a chance to see the gym, and I got a chance to walk around and see some of the history and the culture, which I think is very important to kind of when you go and visit the school to see why that school is a pillar of the community as well. So that's some of the work we've been doing. Around the lawsuit, I think that even though litigation did start, I'm happy to announce, I think that there's a press statement coming out that the city and the school district of Philadelphia, and the city includes city council and the mayor's office. This is not just the mayor's office running shot here, under the representation of the city solicitor. And we were able to figure out how to get from point A to point B. And I'm very proud of the fact that we have found a way to talk about sustainability as it relates to keeping up with what's required under the law. We were to clarify some things that might not have been clarified at the outset, but also create shared language, shared understanding, and shared ability and capacity to be ever transparent as well. So I think that should not be something we don't take, I think, not a lap around the field to say we did it, but I think that this can be the foundation for even more village-oriented work that can be done as we continue to fund this public education renaissance. So that being said, I think that kind of covers it. And I just want to say thank you, Isaiah. I'll call you Isaiah in this space, but Chair Thomas, Council President Clark, the mayor, the managing director, for keeping this what it has been, a family dispute where we were able to work something out. I am very hopeful that we won't ever have to go down that route again. And I'm looking forward to how this evolves into ever-growing collaboration with the city, and then obviously with the state as well.
Thank you, Board President. We appreciate it. I also want to just take a moment to recognize that Councilmember Lozada has joined us in this hearing today. Thank you, Council member. We appreciate it. And I also want to take a moment to acknowledge the presence of State Rep Morgan Cephas, who is the chair of the Philadelphia delegation, who was a part of our conversation earlier and plans on returning as well. So thank you both for being a part of this important conversation. At this point, I would like to open it up to members of the Education Committee to see if anyone has any other questions for the school district of Philadelphia as it relates to our superintendent, his entire team, as well as the president of our school board. Seeing nobody in the chat and hearing no further questions, I want to say thank you all for your presence here today. Thank you for the work that you do for our children. And I look forward to our next conversation, which I know will be happening sooner rather than later. Thank you, everybody. Mr. Maynard, will you please call the next panel as it relates to our topic here today?
Sure. In order to deal with hard stops, we're going to call Cynthia Smith from Baltimore City Public Schools next and ask Mary Filardo to follow immediately afterwards.
Thank you. Please state your name for the record and you may begin with your testimony.
Good afternoon. I'm Cindy Smith. I am the Executive Director of Facilities Planning, Design, and Construction for Baltimore City Public Schools. Been in this particular role for about a year, but I've been here for about 9 years, so a good part of the 21st Century Buildings program, which is what I'll talk about. And I just wanted to say on a personal note, I actually went to college in Philly, and my husband, where I met my husband at college, who is a graduate of Frankfurt High School. So we have something in common. But I will be reading from the written testimony that I submitted. So I am very encouraged to see Philadelphia schools looking at a rebuilding program similar to the 21st Century Buildings program that Baltimore City Schools embarked on just about a decade ago. We have very similar issues, and especially in regards to seeing what the school district just presented, very, very similar issues. We had and still have actually the oldest buildings in the state of Maryland. In addition, City Schools has a declining population, leaving the district with underutilized facilities that we also have to deal with. And like many districts, and particularly us urban districts, City Schools has been historically underfunded in regards to both capital and maintenance funding for decades. For example, currently we receive $243 million less per year than we should to support our facilities appropriately. We are funded almost completely by the state for our capital needs versus other districts in Maryland who have a larger tax base in their local areas and therefore receive additional funding. So I think that those correlate to a lot of the same issues and problems that Philadelphia has as well. In approximately 2012, City Schools embarked on a facilities condition and educational adequacy assessment, resulting in a report that we reference as the 10-year plan, or also the Jacob study, because we have one of those too. This plan included every school in the district, the results from the assessment, and a recommendation for the school and the building. These recommendations included everything from co-locations to closures, replacements, and renovations. Everything was also assigned a year in the plan based on the need of the particular school and building. City Schools shared that plan with all of the communities in the city under a large community engagement effort. The next step, of course, was the funding for this plan. The ACLU worked with us to gather communities, and we marched on Annapolis to demand funding. Obviously, the capital funding we were receiving was not going to support this kind of rebuilding effort that was necessary and identified in the 10-year plan. Ultimately, House Bill 860 was passed to provide bond funding in the expected amount of $1.1 billion to do what was supposed to be the first half of the 10-year plan. Remember, this was also, about a decade ago. Construction funding was a little bit less expensive then than now. The bill also created a 4-party MOU with City Schools, the state, the City of Baltimore, and the Maryland Stadium Authority, MSA, for reference in the future. MSA, who is a quasi-public agency, had the ability to float bonds, which City Schools did not have. The bill required a contribution of $20 million each from the city, the state, and City Schools for a total of $60 million each year to the financing fund established in the bill to back the bonds that would be sold. This will continue until all of the bonds related to the program are fully paid off or retired, which is to be 30 years from the time of issuance of the final MSA bonds. I do believe the last bond was issued last year for the final school in the program. The MOU also placed MSA in charge of the design and construction, as well as the final say on the funds allocated to each project, with City Schools having authority over the educational programming in the buildings. I just want to add here that this was not to say that the operations team at the City Schools here wasn't doing our work and wasn't doing good work. This was about the funding, the MSA being being the entity to be able to float the bonds. They wanted them in charge of the design and construction. Capital funding remained as still a portion of the state budget that we still received, and all of our normal systemic upgrades like HVAC systems and the couple projects that operations was doing also to replace schools continued. So this was basically operated as a separate construction program in addition to the existing capital funding that we received. Once the program started, of course, it was determined that $1.1 billion would not do half of the district. It would actually only fund 23 to 28 school buildings. In 2022, City Schools refinanced part of the bond, requiring us to put in another 10 years of payments, but obtaining funding for a 29th school in the program. To date, City Schools has replaced or renovated 26 buildings. We still have, under this program, we have replaced or renovated 26 buildings. We still have one in construction and the last two are in design. At this time, unfortunately, there is no talk of additional funding to continue through the 21st Century Buildings Plan to update or replace our remaining approximately 100 buildings. So we are back to our underfunding annually and trying to do everything with approximately $30 million a year, which does not do much. Along with the other stipulations, the House bill also required city schools to close and consolidate 26 schools and obtain a utilization rate of 86% across the district by 2022. Working closely with our communities, we have made the very difficult moves to close the 26 schools, and we did achieve the utilization target required. What I kind of want to focus on, though, are the lessons learned that we have kind of grasped throughout this process that may benefit others embarking on similar endeavors. Number one, the forced school closures as part of the requirement has strained relationships with city schools and the communities we serve. These communities went out and fought for the funding for the schools. They marched on Annapolis for them and then turned around and had several schools closed within their communities. Even though the schools where the students were redistricted to were new or renovated, and there was a tremendous amount of engagement efforts to bring the communities together when that happened, there was still a significant sense of loss within these communities that were still receiving feedback and pushback on to this date. So that has been a very difficult part of this process. We would encourage the development of EDGE specs and minimum design standards prior to embarking on a program. It was relieving to hear that the school district already does have something. I would suggest at least reviewing them to update. The ED specs set the ED program and the required spaces to support the educational program for the school. Per the legislative action we were under, this was the only part in which we had oversight and control. The ED specs should be tight and should be held and maintained as the absolute requirements. In our experience, many of our schools were under budgeted by MSA as they were setting the budgets. And as the entity setting the budgets didn't understand school design and construction, particularly in the beginning, as well as the needs of a school district. Then City Schools was held to that budget for the project, which often meant cutting educational spaces. This has compromised many of the school programs that we need to run. In addition, design standards set the minimum requirements for the building system and some materials. In the absence of design standards at the start of our program, MSA was able to install some systems and materials that are going to end up costing us to maintain over the lifespan of the building. Once we did get our design standards in place, they still pushed on it since that was what they had already done. And in addition, since we were already battling the budgets that had already been set, we were forced to give in to systems that are not what we want in our buildings. And are going to be very difficult to maintain and operate over the life cycle. The district should know what their minimum needs are to be able to operate and maintain the buildings and needs to hold to those throughout the process. Since MSA was in charge of the funding authorizations, their priority was first cost, not life cycle cost. I would encourage any program to include language about analyzing the life cycle costs and requiring that as a factor for decision-making during the design and value engineering decisions. This is just good architectural and engineering design practice anyway. But this is going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions, over the life cycle of our buildings, as we have to operate and maintain systems that are not the ones that we are familiar with or the ones that are necessarily best used in a school environment. I would also encourage language that gives the school system the authority to deny any decisions that will be detrimental to the operation of the school during its life cycle. House Bill 860 did set up two required bodies for reporting out on the progress of the plan. The first being called the Coordinating Committee, which is led by the city and centers around partnerships with the city to support the schools, such as safe paths to school, bike lanes, redevelopment opportunities, etc. This has been a great partnership with the city. The second one, the Executive Committee, is primarily a reporting entity which meets quarterly and which the public can attend to ask questions and to hear the status overall of the program. We would encourage both of these types of entities, something similar. The partnership with the local agencies are important in regards to supporting the school efforts, and the public wants to hear the progress of the plans, not just necessarily about their particular school, but the overall. We are also required to provide an annual report to the Board of Public Works that outlines the status, the community engagement, the funds spent, et cetera, to keep everybody on track and the public aware of what's going on. Community engagement is a large element of the 21st Century Buildings program as a whole. We have a community engagement team just dedicated to supporting the community meetings during the design and construction, to support the closing school process, to support ribbon cuttings, activities to bring the communities together in the merging situations, etc. They're actually a fairly large team and very busy just to continue to support this program throughout its endeavors. So I will admit that our communication with MSA has been contentious at times. It was a forced partnership that wasn't necessarily our choice, but required for the funding to be obtained. So it was worth it because we needed that money. We have often been at odds because our mission is very different than theirs. A partner in this type of program needs to understand that schools aren't just a different type of office building or a commercial building. The purpose in a school is very different, and the infrastructure needs to support the purpose. Without that understanding, it is a battle for every step. In addition, constant communication outside of the design and construction meetings is essential. We hold an executive meeting monthly between MSA and city schools to talk over outstanding issues that come up that need decisions, cooperation between us, etc., that haven't been able to come up or that aren't necessarily related to a design or construction project in particular. Additionally, my counterpart at MSA and I meet weekly where we address things that have popped up on one side or the other that our project managers or our warranty managers need support on to be addressed and to make sure that they're resolved. Sharing these responsibilities and creating a professional working relationship has helped to eliminate some of what was previous arguments and ultimately allows us to create better buildings for our students and staff. The program has ultimately allowed us to complete what will be 29 buildings for our students. Unfortunately, we still have many to go. But it has been very useful and beneficial, and it has been helpful to us.
Thank you. That was excellent testimony, a lot of great information, phenomenal feedback. I know I have some questions, but I would like to let our next member of this particular panel provide testimony, and then I'll circle back around with questions. So please state your name for the record, and you may begin with your testimony.
I apologize. I do have a firm stop at 1, so I just want to make sure that that's out there.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that information.
Mary Filardo, if you're connected, could you please begin your testimony?
Yes. Hi. Good afternoon now. I'm Mary Filardo, and I don't know, David, if you can put the written testimony into the chats and other people can reach it in that way. That would be great. So I'm Mary Filardo, and I'm Executive Director of the 21st Century School Fund, which is an almost 30-year-old nonprofit that's been working on local, state, and federal policy associated with public school infrastructure. My roots are in the District of Columbia Public Schools, and that was where I first cut my teeth. So many of these conversations are extremely familiar to me from the public-private partnerships and the other kinds of authorities. That all of this work is what I've lived and breathed for the last 30 years. So I have testimony in there about bravery and how important it is to be brave in this work. But I want to actually skip what I've written, and I would like to share my screen if I could, just for a moment. Can I do that? Can you give me the permission on that? Will that work?
Tech, is that okay?
Yeah. So while you do that, I'll keep going so as not to take too much time. What I am a little bit concerned about as I listen to sort of different governance models for school construction and school responsibilities. Okay. Is essentially being clear on what, can you see now this beautifully colored green and orange document?
Yes.
Okay,
We can't, the writing is a little small, but we can see the document.
Let me see, I can make it bigger. How about that?
Much better.
Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to focus on is that it really actually doesn't matter. And we had done a study back in 1999, actually, with the World Bank Group, whether you're managing it in-house, whether you're privatizing kind of contracting out the entire, management system of your facilities or your capital program, or whether you have some hybrid of it. It really what's important is that you have these essentials for a capital program. And really what it means, and this is why I think it's so important that the council is looking at this, is you have to have laws and policies in place for governance and decision-making around your public infrastructure, for funding around your for the management, even sort of what are going to be procurement laws and decision-making and planning around the facilities management, the planning, and the data and information management and the transparency of that, and then accountability. So these are the sort of key elements that have to be in place no matter who's responsible for your facilities, whether it's the school district of Philadelphia or whether you turn it over to a school construction authority like in New York City, or the DGS, which is who does it in Washington, D.C. It's under the mayor. It's a kind of a city agency responsibility, again, a little bit of a hybrid. But that these elements have to be in place. And I think what is important for the council and community to understand is that this work has to have policy and code associated with it. It isn't just about management. And so one of the things that I would urge the council to do with its partners in the community and at the school district is really identify what are the biggest obstacles to why you have not actually implemented a major modernization program prior to this time. And I will tell you that in the District of Columbia, we started this process because we were involved in the first facility master plan back in the mid-90s. And there was no vision to modernize every school in every neighborhood. It just didn't exist. We were reacting to, in our case, it was fire code violations. In your case, it's been mostly lead and asbestos. But the district was on an entirely reactive kind of management model. And so we put forward a proposal, was from the community to the city council and to the school district to do an educational plan. Now, I have to say, when I listened to Superintendent Wadlington talk about the plan that they're envisioning, it sounds like an architectural plan. It doesn't actually sound like the plan that you need, which is going to be a very difficult plan that says who gets what resources and where. And I think that it's important to listen to Cindy from Baltimore on the school closings. The sense of loss that you get from losing a school, particularly in a low-income community, particularly in communities that have been redlined and discriminated against over decades and decades, that now you're going to take their public school is just incredible. And we're seeing this not just in the urban areas, but there's a school district in Kansas, rural district. I think it was something like 40 kids in the high school. And the school district decided to close that high school. And the community is so furious that they have divorced themselves from their school district, right? So the sense of loss and the importance to work with the communities on what are their schools is absolutely fundamental. So the issues of the politics, for anybody to say, oh, we're going to take politics out of this, I would not work with them. It is political. It is legitimately political, and it has to be dealt with the constituencies as legitimate political, who's getting what and when. So I'm going to stop there because this stuff upsets me a little bit, because it is fundamentally going to be who's going to pay, who's going to get what. And I would argue that one last thing, on the revenue side, you have got to identify revenue. You have to look at getting revenue from universities. You have to look at getting revenues from so-called nonprofit hospitals. You have to look at where the money is in your city, and they have to be able to provide a revenue stream that actually brings back to the city some of what they've gotten from the city over many years. In the District of Columbia, what we what we use to finance what's been a $6 billion program for 50,000 kids is the commercial transfer tax revenue. So there's a tax whenever the commercial building sells, and that revenue has been dedicated to paying for school construction. So there's got to be something in Philadelphia that's going to have a robust ability to pay, because you're looking at $10 to $12 billion over the next probably 10 years if you were really going to address the level of need that you have in the city. So with that, I'm going to close.
Thank you. Thank you both for your testimony. I think it was extremely powerful, and I think it was extremely informative. I do want to go back to something that was the issue that Mary raised that I think you talked about first, Cindy, as it relates to the community pushback. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what took place in the midst of that process that put you in a position where you received significant community pushback, even though you were looking to build new spaces?
Right.
That's for Cindy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of our communities really centralize themselves around their schools, right? And I think that is the case in particularly a lot of places in the urban setting. So even though our first year, I will say our first year and our second year of our program, we really focused on, because we had to meet that utilization target and the closures, we focused on receiving schools, the schools that would be receiving students from a closure emerging schools. Those were the schools that we focused on getting completed in the 21st century plan in those first 2 years. But even with the fact that students would be going to a school that was new, renovated, or brand new, period, it's not necessarily the one that's in their community then. So what we did, because we don't have a lot of property, right? There's not a lot of vacant property that we could purchase. We were focused on, I'm just going to pick two schools. So if we were closing West Side Elementary School, and all the students would then go to Dorothy I. Height. Now, we were well within the mile, well within walking distance. That school was going to get a major renovation plus a significant addition to house the additional students. It still was a loss of West Side Elementary School, and the community, that centralized around West Side Elementary School then really suffered and felt that loss. And since we did all this, of course, through a community engagement process, and all the school board had to still vote on all the closures, despite the fact that they were outlined in the 10-year plan. Every time that as soon as we started a process, we had a lot of people showing up to school board meetings to say, hey, you're really affecting our community. This is the central hub of our community. It's not the same. Just, even going to a new school, it's not the same. So that was really a lot of that pushback and feedback and harm that's been done to those communities, because it is a loss. It is definitely a loss to them. And even though the students are then going to a better building, a new school, and we did a lot of activities to merge the communities together to attend that school, it's still a loss for that original community.
Thank you for that response. I very much appreciate it. Mary, you were pretty passionate about politics not being involved, and I understand as it relates to communities and community input, but can you elaborate a little bit based on your experiences doing this work of why you think that's something that's inevitable as it relates to dealing with bureaucracy and politics when you're trying to address issues like we are as it relates to facilities?
Well, I think what I'm saying is that politics is involved, and it's legitimately involved. And in some ways, I see it as a way to try to keep communities and stakeholders out of the process by saying, oh, it's not political, as though somehow it's just technical and you should just leave it to the so-called consultants and experts, and that if parents are involved in it, if community members are involved in it, or other kind of interest groups, then somehow, oh, they're making it political, and it's really not political. But in fact, these are public properties, these are public buildings, these are public responsibilities. And even as you're looking, Councilmember Thomas, at like the three models that were presented, those are actually not, those are like apples and oranges and bananas. They're like not the same kinds of options at all. your public-private partnership that's a development one is sort of a way to use a piece of land to raise revenue. The kind of sale leaseback is also sort of a revenue related one, but the PIDC is just like the Massachusetts, or not Massachusetts, this would be the Maryland Stadium Authority, is just a financing vehicle. So they're not actually, you didn't have three options of the same type that were presented. They were quite different. And in fact, all of them, like the Maryland Stadium Authority, as Ms. Smith was talking about, they're like financing entities. They're real estate. They want to get a project done. They want to get it out the door. They don't have to operate and maintain either those communities, frankly, or those buildings over time. So they are a very different entity. So part of what I felt concerned about in the description of your planning process is that your plan process isn't just looking at the design of the buildings to support the academic vision of Philadelphia Public Schools. That's one part of it, and it's an important part of it, but it's also how are you going to manage not only the construction, but the operations and maintenance of these over time? How are you going to pay for it? How are you going to ensure that you've got stable funding, not just on the capital side, but on the operating and maintenance side? And so all of these things together are really a part of your plan. And it doesn't sound like what you're going to get on June 30th is going to be nearly comprehensive enough or engaging enough to move you to where you need to be. So I felt concerned actually as I listened to the school district talk about what they've got planned for June 30th. And frankly, I looked at their strategic guideposts and things. I don't think it's going to get you there.
Well, you really did your homework. We appreciate it. I know we have some hard stops at 1 o'clock, but I think you just challenged us, honestly, on the city council side to push the school district to think about this a lot more critically than what was communicated in today's hearing, looking at life after the building has been built, not just from the community engagement perspective, but from a fiscal perspective as well, too. I listened to Ms. Smith talk about 86% of the facilities have to actually be filled as it relates to capacity. I know that that's an issue that we have in the city with our changing population, right? Like we have certain parts of the city that has way more people than what it had when this original structure was first designed. So, we have to think about population change, conditions of buildings, community input. You're right. It's a heavy lift. And after listening to you and comparing some of the things that you've done to their testimony, we do have a lot more work to do. I do appreciate you both working with my office and my team and having a number of conversations with us leading to this hearing. And I know there's a hard stop at 1 o'clock. So I would just ask that if you don't mind that your door stays open for us to be able to reach out and consult with you throughout the course of this process. So some of the gaps that you communicated today, we can use you as a resource, hopefully, to try to fill those gaps and make sure that we're moving in the best interest as possible for the children and the families and all the stakeholders who are involved in our schools.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely, for me too. Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
This is great. Thank you. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here today, and we appreciate your passion and dedication to the children, not just of Philadelphia, but all across the country based on this dialogue. So thank you.
And if there are further questions afterwards, after I have to jump, please feel free to send them over. I can respond back. It's not a problem.
Thank you. That's great. We appreciate
thank you.
Thank you both. Mr. Maynard, that was very informative. I think we're having an amazing conversation thus far. Can you please call our next panel of witnesses to essentially testify on today's topic?
Of course, Mr. Chair. The only thing I'll point out is Councilmember Gaudier has a hand raised. I don't know how you want to acknowledge.
That was from.
No,
it's
new.
Oh, I'm sorry. Chair recognizes.
No. It's a new hand.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to say how much I really appreciated the last panel, especially Ms. Ferlardo's testimony. It was just really honest and informative. I have a question. I'm not sure if anyone who testified can answer it, but I wanted to put it out there. Since the state provides the bulk of our public school funding, I wanted to know if there are any opinions on the role that a new authority should have with the state, or the role that the state should play with regards to a new school building authority. I don't know if there's comment on that from anybody who testified today.
So, Councilmember, I can take a stab at it. One of the things that the 21st Century School Fund does is we work with state facility offices all across the United States, including Rhode Island's Building Authority, but also with state officials, and in fact have worked with Pennsylvania's sort of anemic state program, which at one time was much stronger. And part of what has really fallen over the last decade is the state participation and funding for school facilities nationally. Now, there are some states, Delaware actually pays over 50% for any project, about 60% almost. Wyoming pays it all. There's a lot of variety, but it's an area that the states really have to do much more. And I think this is where and to some extent this has happened with your court case, that it's got to be a rural-urban partnership, because the rural districts and the high-need urban districts are the ones struggling the most. But the states have absolutely not stepped up to the responsibility. And it's something that I think should be a priority for the school district in making sure that the state does its share. And when you look at how they fund on an operating side, on average, about 47% is state, 45% is local. This is nationally, and only about 8% is federal. At the average for state funding is about 16% for capital. So this is nationally, they're way low. And frankly, in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, they're even lower than that. They're not doing 16% for capital. So I think it's an area that communities have to, make their voices heard, in their state capitals. But I believe that that's what's going to happen, and that will make a difference.
And do you have an opinion on, if we were to form this at the local level, is there a structure in relation to the state, or a policy in relation to the state that we should be trying to adopt to achieve that optimal funding level?
In a sense, the states have a little bit the same problem that you do as a city, which is they're going to need data. They're going to need governance. They're going to have to decide who gets what and why, which districts get what. You're looking at which schools, but this is going to be what districts get what. So that sheet that I did on those 6 elements, they're going to exist at the state level as well. The management is a little bit different because they're not managing the actual construction or the maintenance, but on the governance, on the data, on the decision making, on the oversight, and on the funding, those are going to be really critical. And there needs to be policy associated with that. And I think there was in 2018 a state in Pennsylvania, a state committee that made a bunch of recommendations for state roles and responsibilities. And I know that Senator Hughes has been a real champion for school facilities at the state level. But there is going to need to be a real push, by communities and by this is the politics of it, right? The politics has got to be aligned at the state level, because it'll be that state and city partnership that's going to primarily push this. We're actually working to get some federal dollars targeted to these highest need districts, but that's, the politics on that too. So, but I think that it's actually important for the council to have a position, for the council to be supporting policy change at the state level, as well as getting policies in place at the city level to support really what's going to be probably a $20 billion over 20 years investment for the city of Philadelphia.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilmember. I appreciate those questions and appreciate your answers. Are there any other questions from members of this committee for this particular panel? Hearing none, thank you, everyone, for your participation. It's very much appreciated. Mr. Maynard, can you please call the next panel?
The next witness listed to testify is Art Steinberg, the president of the AFT. Mr. Steinberg unfortunately had an emergency. His written testimony was circulated to all of the committee members, and We apologize, but we'll move on to Tony Wigglesworth, counsel for AFL-CIO. Mr. Wigglesworth, are you connected?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much for the opportunity to provide this testimony. I'm going to paraphrase and augment the written testimony that I previously submitted. I am the director of the Philadelphia Area Labor Management Committee. We operate the local labor management programs for both the Philadelphia Building Construction Trades Council as well as the Philadelphia Council of the AFL-CIO. And I'm going to focus my comments on what Philadelphia has done, given being confronted with this set of circumstances in the past, and then talk about lessons learned regarding that activity, and then end with the future. In 2006, the School District of Philadelphia issued a bond for $2.1 billion for new construction. The current superintendent at that time was Paul Vallis. Mr. Vallis was more of a builder than he was an educator, and decided that what he wanted to do was to build 10 new schools in the city of Philadelphia and accomplish 30 major renovations in the city of Philadelphia. To do this, he hired approximately 35 employees within the School District of Philadelphia dedicated to construction called the Philadelphia School Improvement Team. And they partnered with an outside architecture and construction management firm, URS, to proceed with a campaign of capital construction, the likes of which, quite honestly, had not been seen in Philadelphia. The program took place from 2006 through 2011. It was extended by 1 year. We did deliver 10 schools on time and on budget. We also, as a result of a commitment from the Building Trades Council, memorialized in a partnership agreement signed by the Philadelphia Building Construction Trades Council and the school district, moved 750 Philadelphia school graduates into our local apprenticeship programs. The program worked because it had constant communication. My organization's role in it was to implement a worksite communication process so that school district employees and school district representatives met with contractor personnel on a weekly basis in order to make sure that progress was achieved. And in order to model behavior, we actually lent a senior executive, a former construction manager from the private sector, to assist in the effort. I'll jump to the back end. In 2012, early on, we convened the lessons learned. And our lessons learned pointed to some things that we could have quite honestly done better. One was we kind of hid behind the skirts of the existing School Reform Commission. If you remember, that's what we had, and did not engage the community as much as we should have or could have. The second lesson learned was that we had 10 construction projects with 10 architects and 10 construction management firms, and there's a better way to do work than to have 10 separate projects. A group of us investigated Detroit, Michigan, which was engaged in a capital program starting in 2010. What they did was to come up with a common model. They pursued that common model, and they managed to shave off, by their estimation, 30% of the construction costs by replicating the same design build process throughout the activity. The other thing that we learned was that there's real strength in partnership. We had a very close working relationship with the school district, with URS, with our contractors, and with the Building Trades Council. Flashing forward to now, we have new leadership, as you know, both in the superintendent's office as well as within the Building Trades Council. We embarked on negotiations late last year to develop an agreement between the School District of Philadelphia and the Building and Construction Trades Council, which was signed earlier this year. It incorporates a lot of the lessons learned from our last experience, but it also enhances the pipeline process between the School District of Philadelphia and our apprenticeship programs. Most importantly, it commits the Philadelphia Building and Construction Trades Council to cooperate with the career technical education aspects of each Philadelphia high school and even middle school to ensure that what's being learned in those settings is appropriate for apprenticeship and engagement. We're just beginning that work. We convened a group last month of apprentice coordinators and some school district representatives in order to pursue that work. So the Building Trades Council, its constituent contractors and association stand ready to help with this undertaking. But I want to throw out a note of caution. And the note of caution is that there is a great deal of construction demand in the marketplace right now. Upon request from the Philadelphia Building Construction Trades Council, my organization has been engaged in trying to develop a local network, data-driven network of demand over the next 10 to 12 years. We're working with Everyone Builds, the successor organization to the West Philadelphia Consortium. We're working with the city's Office of Infrastructure Capital Programming, and we are working with the School District of Philadelphia. And right now, taking all of those entities into account, we are looking at total construction demand approaching $18 billion over the next 10 years and $9 billion over the next 5 years. We need to figure out where people are going to come from. We need to use that in order to inform the apprenticeship process to make sure that our local residents are availed the opportunity of being involved in our apprenticeship programs and get to work on school district projects. I'll end there. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And I want to thank the committee for allowing me to do this. It's been very informative to me as well.
Thank you for your testimony. It's very much appreciated. And I think it's very important that you offer a perspective that hasn't yet been offered as it relates to the construction side, the job side. And, you know, you gave a lot of valuable information about what happened in the past. But I think, you know, a key component to what you said is making sure that we understand the scale of what we're going to be looking to do so we can ensure that we have the capacity to hire people local, put folks through the proper apprenticeship programs, train them the right way, so that it could also help spark the local economy and address some of the issues that we have as it relates to jobs and poverty. So, you know, that you're absolutely on point, and we appreciate that perspective. Are there any questions from members of this committee for this particular witness? Okay, hearing none, I want to thank you for your testimony. I know I had a couple questions myself, but I'm going to pass because I know we're running a little bit short on time. And, you know, Mr. Tony, I can give you a call and we can talk about this stuff in depth anytime. You know, this is what we love to do. So thank you for your time. I appreciate it. And we appreciate all you do as it relates to helping the construction industry as well as the labor industry here in the city of Philadelphia. So thank you for your service.
Thank you for the opportunity.
We appreciate it. Mr. Maynard, will you please call the next witness to testify here today?
Sure. Due to scheduling issues, we're going to call Rachel Pritzker for public comment and then jump to other witnesses.
No, Mr. Maynard, let's finish the panel first. We'll finish the panelists and then we'll go to public comment. But let's finish the panelists first.
Yes, sir. I apologize. That's my bad. The next witness we'll hear from is Ms. Edmonds from Unite Here. Ms. Edmonds, are you connected? Okay, we'll try. Ms. Edmonds, is that you? Okay, we'll swing back to Ms. Edmonds. Joan Dupree from Frankfurt High School is listed, but Joan is unfortunately having cell phone issues, so we're going to skip her for now. Sam Rhodes, are you still there with us?
I'm here.
Oh, there we go. Joan, would you please begin your testimony? I apologize.
Oh, yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. I'm Joan Dupree. I'm a senior at Frankfurt High School. I want to start off by saying the school to me means more than just a physical place that I would go to every day for school. This place in all reality was a home, whether we saw it that way or not. And quite frankly, I want to go back to my home. I want to have fun and live life like I used to in Frankfurt. Although I didn't know what to think of Frankfurt at first when I got to be in the building for the first time, I soon found my way to meeting some amazing people, students and teachers included. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows either. Inevitably, like in life, you'll have some bad encounters. But what amazed me was how, thanks to the school, I had people who had my back, and this was a nice new experience for me, seeing as everybody was stuck at home for a year and a half. We all lost touch with the idea of how to be people and how to interact and socialize. But Frankfurt took the time to not only get us to interact with each other, but they did what they could to bring us back to a feeling of normalcy. This is why I want my last year to be at this school, whether that be online or in person. I just want to be in the place that I know and feel comfortable at. And honestly, I want the management of our schools to be a little better because not all kids my age or younger are understanding and agreeable. They are hard-headed and reckless, and they don't feel like fighting or trying to keep a place like Frankfurt open without good reason. This shouldn't, and with all due respect, this shouldn't have been an issue having to deal with asbestos and school closing. On top of that, reporters looking around our school and field looking for information. That is not a healthy environment we need, because no matter what anybody says or how grown up we feel or how many responsibilities we have, we are still kids, and we will be kids till the day we graduate. And all we want is a safe space to learn, but ultimately to be kids for the last couple years of our childhood we have left. I have 1 year left. I've done my time and I've lived what I've had to live. But what about the other kids who need a place of substance and structure? Who need what I needed after COVID? Although Frankfurt gets a bad reputation for idiotic reasons, they can't hide the fact that it's still a good school with a good staff and with a good place for kids to come into and be themselves and express themselves. And I truly believe that in a school like this is where you find yourself or you become who you truly are.
Thank you for your testimony. That was powerful. That was amazing. Just for the record, clearly I have a bias. I'm a Frankfurt High School grad myself. But when you started high school, what year were you in, and how were we as it relates to the pandemic?
I started high school in 2020.
Okay, so right at the height of the pandemic. So you've been in and out of school pretty much your whole high school career, and your class of 2024, is that correct?
Yes.
So the class of 2024 has had a very unique experience as it relates to your high school journey. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to testify today. Thank you for making yourself vulnerable and sharing our story. And please, I guess before you close out, what do you think we can do as elected officials, specifically for young people at Frankfurt who had to start their year in the pandemic and start their high school journey in a pandemic and is forced to end their high school journey this way? How can we, as government, we have folks from a school district listening, what can we do to make your journey in your senior year special as it relates to you closing out your high school experience?
Speaking for myself, I would just want to be at Frankfurt. I started there. I did my time there. I just want to finish there with the people that I know, the people that I came to know, that I came to grow with, because we all know the pandemic was a hard time. So it would be amazing to close out a long journey with the people that I've endured that journey with.
Awesome. That's great. Well, again, thank you for your testimony today. Thank you for being brave and coming on here to talk to us about how it feels to be you, because none of us knows that. And I think that narrative is important as it relates to this conversation that we're having. So thank you so much. We appreciate it.
Thank you for your time.
No problem. Mr. Maynard, will you, Chair recognizes Councilmember Brooks. Did you want to? Oh, okay. Sorry. Mr. Maynard, will you please take a moment to call our next panelist to testify today?
Is Ms. Edmonds from Unite Here available? Ms. Edmonds? Okay. I'm not hearing from her. Sam Rhodes from PIDC, would you begin your testimony?
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Thomas and Vice Chair Brooks, members of the Education Committee. My name is Sam Rhodes, and I'm the Executive Vice President. at PIDC and offer this testimony on behalf of PIDC. I want to start by thanking you and the committee very much for holding this hearing and hosting a number of very important perspectives today on arguably what is the most important issue confronting the city today. Our primary intent in testifying is simply to confirm that the authority-based model does exist in Philadelphia and is actively used with a track record of successful implementation of civic projects that is accommodated and can accommodate the range of projects that are contemplated by these hearings. PIDC is the city's economic development arm. It was formed as a nonprofit partnership between the City of Philadelphia and the Chamber of Commerce for Greater Philadelphia in 1958, with a mission to spur investment, support business growth, and foster development that creates jobs, revitalizes neighborhoods, and drives inclusive growth to every corner of Philadelphia. PIDC manages the Philadelphia Authority for Industrial Development, or PAID as it is known. PAID is a governmental authority. It was formed in 1967 by an ordinance of City Council under Pennsylvania's Industrial Development Authority Act, which is now known as the Economic Development Financing Law. PIDC and the City of Philadelphia rely on PAID to provide a wide variety of functions that are eligible under its enabling statute and are consistent with our economic development mission. These functions include issuing tax-exempt financing, as we've heard earlier in earlier testimony, for Philadelphia-based nonprofits and small manufacturers, acting as a conduit for a variety of Commonwealth or city-driven financing activities, and also selling or holding title to real estate on the city's behalf, such as the Navy Yard or other industrial-based real estate. These conduit powers enable PAID to partner with the city or other public bodies, such as the school district, to facilitate significant civic projects. With respect to the schools, for example, PAID has partnered in the past to sell excess real estate that was identified by the school district and is currently very proud to be in the partnership with the district to construct 3 new schools, as the school district identified earlier. This arrangement works much as contemplated under these hearings and allows the school district to offer more effectively manage construction of new state-of-the-art schools for Philadelphia's children while accomplishing multiple goals. Specifically, and as an example, the school district's construction of these schools through PAID allows it to incorporate goals for diversity and the development and construction of these facilities while maintaining property ownership and full control over design and construction. The current partnership provides for the new construction of 3 new schools that include the Lewis C. Cassidy Plus School in Overbrook, the Amy James Martin School in Port Richmond, and the Thomas Holm Elementary School in Torresdale. The Cassidy project is under construction, about 15% complete at this point, and the Holm and Amy Martin projects have completed the RFP process. In closing, we're proud of our relationship with the school district and wants to reiterate that the city created PAID as an authority in 1967 with a track record of successful implementation of these types of projects. We thank you again for your vision in supporting school development, and we appreciate the opportunity to provide our perspective on how a governmental authority might support the school district to most effectively accomplish its objectives and provide a positive and supportive learning environment for our school children. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony. I'm not going to be long-winded because I know we're a little behind, actually a lot behind at this point. But you spoke about schools and projects that already exist, which means there's already a working relationship there. If we were to scale up and say, you know what, PIDC, we want to give you $2 billion over 5 years to build new facilities from a capacity perspective, would you be able to handle that? And what would it take for you to be able to handle a project like that?
I'll give you 2 levels of answers. The first answer, of course, is we'd have to think about it and plan for it. And probably, $2 billion is a lot of money, and we would need to put together, sit down with you and members of the school district and plan for it. I think the second level of answer is that it depends on the role that we're being asked to play. So in these roles that we play for civic projects and for the school, it can be everything from as little as being effectively a conduit for the financing, as I think some of the testimony indicated. And that would be the lightest touch. And even at that touch, there are some benefits for being the conduit for the construction contracts and the financing that I highlighted, like being able to meet goals for diversity and so on, which are a challenge for the school district on their own. If we were to be more engaged in terms of active construction management, in other words, if that were to be taken out of what the school district does currently, that would be an additional scope of work that we don't currently provide. And so that would require more time to think through how that would best operate.
Thank you. Are there any questions from members of the committee for this particular panelist? Okay, hearing none. I want to say thank you.
I have one.
Oh, Chair recognizes.
I have one quick question, real quick.
Sure.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the PAID program and like who sits on the board and who appoints the board of that, the governance structure?
Yes, Councilwoman, the PAID was created in 1967 by an ordinance of City Council. So there's various number of acts at the Pennsylvania level that that allow for various authorities, and ours was then created pursuant to an ordinance. Pursuant to that ordinance, the mayor appoints our board. The board meets regularly.
Thank you so much. That's it.
Welcome.
Thank you, council member. Thank you, colleague. Thank you again for your testimony. We are excited to have you as a partner. And I just want to say on the record again that I'm a big fan of PIDC being the folks that helps us lead this process, because we know from a capacity perspective, it's asking a lot for government to be responsible for all the things that we're responsible for. And you are already showing us as we speak right now that you have the capacity to do it if the resources are there. And we've listened to a ton of testimony. Clearly, if we plan it the right way, it's something that we can execute, and we can do something that has been a cloud over the city of Philadelphia, at least all of my life. And I would bet a lifetime before mine as well, too. So thank you, sir. We appreciate your testimony today, and we appreciate the work that you do for the city of Philadelphia.
Well, thank you. We thank you very much for the opportunity and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you. Looking forward to working together. Mr. Maynard, can you call our next witness to testify?
Our final two witnesses are Ms. Edmonds from Unite Here, if she's available, and Professor Rodriguez from the University of Pennsylvania. Ms. Edmonds, if you can hear me and can speak, please do so. Okay. Professor Rodriguez, if you could take over, the hearing is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I know that we're running short on time. Can you hear me?
We can, and we appreciate your patience.
Oh, yeah, no worries. In the interest of time, I do have written testimony, but I'm gonna kind of skip around it because a lot of it is redundant. I did want to,
Professor, before you get too deep, could you close the blinds behind you?
Oh, yeah. Sure.
We can't see you at all.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Maybe I'll
no
just
worries.
switch around. I'm traveling right now, so.
Mr. Maynard, you assume that the professor wanted us to see it. You never know. You know.
No, it's cool. It's cool. Hi, everyone. So yeah, Akira Drake Rodriguez. I'm assistant professor of city and regional planning at the Weitzman School of Design at Penn. I wanted to very briefly lift up the testimony that was provided by Mary Filardo, in particular, directly engaging and being aware of some of the politics of school resource and facility allocation across the city. I'll touch a bit upon that on my testimony, but I do think it's very, very important that we acknowledge the histories of disinvestment and the sort of racialized outcomes of school resource allocation in the city of Philadelphia when we are planning for future school facilities. So Across the multiple years, groups and neighborhoods and interests that I've conducted research on around school facilities in Philadelphia, one thing remains clear. There is a critical need to include and center the voices of school users in school facilities planning processes. Further, this inclusion and centering must show consideration of the historical inequities that create place-based and racialized disparities across and within school facilities. When I began my research with the Friends of Neighborhood Education group, there was a growing interest from school-based groups to mobilize their fundraising capacity and political capital to improve the facilities of all public schools in Philadelphia. It was clear from their past activities that investments in public schoolyards, libraries, after-school care and activities, and arts and music programming were vital components to increasing enrollment at traditional neighborhood public schools. Since 1990, nearly 75,000 students have left the neighborhood public schools, and that number continues to decline in spite of overall population increases in the city. Many of the reductions in staff and programming, such as custodial and maintenance staff, being cut by 50%, and the district currently having only 4 full-time librarians across 216 school facilities, were the result of state budget cuts in 2009. Even with the recent rulings from the state for funding lawsuit, which will provide additional resources to the school district, the decades of disinvestment and deferred maintenance will be difficult to overcome without careful planning and increased advocacy from elected and appointed officials. Following the closure of 24 schools in 2013, many of which were concentrated in majority Black and majority Latinx neighborhoods, entire communities were destabilized as its anchor, the public school, was either converted to new uses or abandoned entirely. These past decisions were made without equitably and deeply engaging communities that were impacted most, and testimony from school board meetings since these closures highlight the public's dissatisfaction with this process and its resultant outcomes. From my research, interviews, and community meetings with the public on the topic of school facilities, there are several priorities the school district needs to balance. The first is publicly accessible data. The School District of Philadelphia offers a robust open data website that provides critical information about demographics, school performance, and parent and staff surveys. This information is also presented in a dashboard format that is easy to read, standardized, and simple to translate using web browser translation services. This is not the case for facilities data. Across all the environmental hazards, asbestos, mold, lead, and vermin, and their disparate programs to remediate and remove them, information is scattered across the website, often in PDF or Google Drive format, and not legible or accessible to the public. Without transparent and accessible data, there is no way to properly assess the equity, comprehensiveness, and legitimacy of a district facilities plan. Undoing the harms of the last state budget cuts. The loss of librarians, arts, music, recreation, maintenance, and administrative staff, such as vice principals and guidance counselors, have contributed to the disinvestment and declining enrollments in our public school facilities. The closure and/or consolidation of our middle schools has also destabilized our public schools, as evidenced by the dramatic outflows of students after the 4th grade. In any new facilities planning process, we must prioritize undoing these harmful rollbacks in order to improve overall school quality for learners and educators and attract more students and teachers. Ongoing and equitable community engagement from planning design to implementation. As noted earlier, the lack of inclusion of teacher, staff, caregivers, and community partners has weakened the trust between these stakeholders and the school district and delegitimized processes and decisions made without them. The school district has many models around creating stakeholder groups that not only make plans, but also oversee their implementation, such as the lead, paint, and plaster group. Stakeholders are concerned their participation and opinions may be solicited, but are not legitimately heard or included in planning and decision-making processes. From the CSPR to the FPP to the ongoing Facilities Environmental Advisory Council, minutes from these meetings suggest stakeholders are confused about these gatherings' overall purpose, are not getting their questions answered in a clear or timely manner, and are burnt out from redundant processes and plans that are never implemented. The district needs to build out permanent community engagement capacity and staff that spend time in communities, work with existing groups, and fund new groups that can build capacity, trust, and buy-in. No further school closures. Finally, the district cannot permanently close any additional school as a means of reducing its operating budget. Research demonstrates these cost savings are minimal and that the impacts of consolidation and closures are harmful to students, educators, and broader communities. School facilities are public assets, and as the city grows through greater investment in its existing school facilities, so too will the demand and need for quality schools and facilities. Schools that are in need of modernization require swing spaces. Other public organizations need additional space, such as Parks and Rec and the libraries. And the media has written extensively on the lack of third spaces that are safe for the city's youth. The district must be creative and conserve these facilities as closures only decrease enrollments, neighborhood populations, and staff retention. These priorities require investment that may exceed the capacity of the state and city's current budget towards public schools. But budgets are and always have been moral documents. If we want to improve the future of the city, we must invest in public schools as a critical infrastructure. Between its workers and its students, schools serve about 15% of the city's population. We cannot afford to ignore its impact on the city any longer. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. We're going to let Ms. Edmonds from Unite Here, who had a hard time connecting, testify next, and then we'll open it up for questions for both panels. Ms. Edmonds, we apologize for the technical issues you had to face, but we're glad you're here. Please state your name for the record, and you may begin with your testimony.
Good afternoon. My name is Tanya Edmonds, and I am here, Unite Here, Local 634 trustee, and a food service worker 3 at Henry Houston Elementary School, which is in the 8th District. On behalf of Local 634, which represents 1,900 food service and climate staff employees who feed and protect students in Philadelphia public school buildings each and every day. I want to thank the Committee on Education and especially Councilmember Thomas for the opportunity to provide testimony. I am here today to testify about safety and security. We can all agree that many of our schools are in disrepair. Students and staff alike face dangerous conditions. I applaud City Council's willingness to explore innovative solutions, such as using an independent authority to manage the school facility monitoring process to ensure that school buildings are healthy, safe, and clean. Unite Here Local 634 is willing and eager to be part of the process and will continue to be loud advocates for funding school repairs and construction at a local and state level. Since the Committee on Education is here today to consider ways that we can work together to ensure that our public school buildings are the safe havens that students and families deserve. I also want to give this committee an overview of process that Local 634 has made in negotiating a new contract with the School District of Philadelphia. As you know, a majority of our union members are Black and are women. Unlike other school district employees, 95% of Local 634 members live in the city of Philadelphia and have children and grandchildren who live with us to attend public schools. Yet for decades, we have been treated as the stepchildren of the school district of Philadelphia. As a reminder, when the school district laid off thousands of non-teaching assistants in 2013, it saved money off the back of students, climate staff employees, which paid significantly less. These employees made just $14 per hour in 2020 and will make just $15.50 by the beginning of the new school year. Unlike school safety officers, teachers, principals, bus drivers, and maintenance staff, none of our members have steps, meaning that those employees make $15.50 regardless of how long they have worked for the school district. When all is said and done, we are the people who feed school district students and keep them safe, but do not make enough to feed our own families and to keep our own children safe. I am here on behalf of my local 634 brothers and sisters to say that one job should be enough, and it's time for change. When all is said and done, all of our union want is for everyone who enters a school, student, families, and staff alike, to feel safe and secure and to be safe and secure. While our union applauds this council effect to make our school buildings safe and modern, our union needs a modern contract that guarantees the school district food service and student climate staff economy, security, and basic tools to ensure school safety. We ask that this committee and all city council members stand with us and support our common sense proposals as we continue to try to reach a fair contract. I, along with my union, Unite Here Local 634 brothers and sisters, are happy to meet with each of you to further explain what we do, what we have proposed, and how those proposals are part of our work to make our schools healthy and safe place to learn and work. I appreciate you giving me this time to give this testimony. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for members of this particular committee for this panel who just testified here today? Okay, hearing no questions from the committee, I want to say thank you to this panel. Professor Rodriguez, thank you for your perspective and your insight. We will definitely consider all of your recommendations as we move forward. And of course, thank you to the hardworking members of Unite Here, who are the backbone of our school district, who helps make sure that our young people have the support system that they need. So thank you very much. With that being said, I believe there are no other panelists to testify on this particular resolution. So we will now open it up to public comment. Mr. Maynard, will you please call the first person who signed up to testify for today's public comment around our resolution here today?
Of course, Mr. Chair. The first person on public comment is Rachel Pritzker. Ms. Pritzker, if you're connected, you can begin your testimony.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me?
You did, because I don't know.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I think the prior person's talking still.
Oh, I don't know.
Ms. Evans, you're still.
If everybody could just mute themselves, please mute yourself. If everybody could, if you're not testifying, please mute yourself. Council Tech Support, can you help us a little bit, please, to make sure everybody is muted? Council Tech Support, can you help us a little bit, please, to make sure everybody's muted?
Yes, we could do that. Thank you.
Why my stuff is still in?
Council Tech Support, can you help us a little, please? Because I don't want to ask. I don't want to ask because I mean, you know, folks have technical difficulties, so we kind of need you to do it. All right, Mr. Maynard, you can call the first person for public comment.
All right.
Ms. Pritzker, if you're ready.
Yep. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman and members of the Committee on Education. For those who may not know me, my name is Rachel Pritzker. I'm the CEO of Pritzker Law Group, the city's only certified women-owned real estate law firm, and the youngest female board member of the Building Industry Association, who I'm not here representing, just to make that clear. I'm here to testify in support of resolution number 230330. I've been in the real estate industry for over a decade, and I can tell you how complicated, capital-intensive, specific, and specialized it is. For those who are not actively participating in development, it may not seem that complicated. You would be misguided. It only gets more complicated when you're dealing with an aging infrastructure, zoning and permitting, community outreach, education, structural issues, remediation, health and safety considerations, a fluctuating interest rate and lending environment, and the list goes on. Now let's add the fact that we're building structures or renovating structures that are to be, in most cases, inhabited by humans. And in this case, the majority of which are our city's children, with, among other resources, built with taxpayer money. For these reasons alone, our city should require, or in this case, demand oversight and be strategic and thoughtful about including only the best, most qualified, competent, unbiased, and experienced individuals advising and working on these buildings and these plans. Unfortunately, that has historically not always been the case. You've all heard the bureaucracy of government and quasi-government organizations' lack of transparency and political considerations doesn't always lend itself to ensuring that the best and brightest are at the helm of major, very specific and specialized projects or functions that require that they be. And that when brought to the table, their suggestions and guidance are not always implemented. We should expect no less for our city and its children, and I believe that is what this legislation seeks to establish, and what hopefully thoughtfully planned oversight with actually experienced individuals, not based on political considerations alone, would and should call for. We have a brain trust of some of the smartest, sophisticated, willing, and highly experienced individuals in the real estate industry in our city with the actual knowledge, skill set, and desire to help our city and its schools. I wholeheartedly support this legislation. I commend Councilman Thomas and this body for this important step and request sincerely that our industry is included as a partner in helping move this forward. It is just the right thing to do. I worked in council back 2015 to 17. This was the most interesting hearing I have seen in a while. This is incredibly encouraging. And it makes me really proud that this body has come together in such a profound way. So thank you so much, Councilman Thomas and City Council members, and thank you for allowing me to testify today.
Thank you for your testimony and your willingness to help with this initiative. We definitely appreciate it. Mr. Maynard, will you please call the next witness?
Council support. Who do we have next for that we have on the line for public comment?
Hello, this is Paul.
Hi, Paul. This is Philadelphia City Council.
Yeah.
You wanted to offer public comment on Resolution 230330.
Yes, I would, please. Thank you.
Please begin when you're ready, sir.
Okay. This is Paul Steinke, Executive Director of Preservation Alliance for Greater Philadelphia. Thank you, Chair Thomas and the Education Committee for giving me a couple minutes to share my testimony today on Resolution 230330. The Preservation Alliance is concerned over the state of the properties owned by the School District of Philadelphia, the school buildings, that is. The majority of the buildings are listed on the National Register of Historic Places or are eligible to be listed through 2 state surveys conducted by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Over 150 built prior to 1938 are listed on the National Register, with about an additional 100 eligible to be listed built between 1938 and 1980. These buildings are made of durable materials and of architectural value that cannot easily be replaced if they're lost. However, in recent times, we have lost a handful. The James Martin School in Port Richmond. Demolition is scheduled to begin very soon. That building was built in 1894. The Thomas Holmes School in the Northeast is slated to be demolished this year, built in 1950. And the Lewis C. Cassidy Elementary School was taken down in 2022. That building was built in 1924. And Solace Cohen Elementary School was taken down in 2018. We're also facing the uncertainty about the future of Frankfurt High School and the reported possibility of demolition. We realize that these buildings have problems due to deferred maintenance and hazardous materials like asbestos. However, these are problems that can be solved. And we believe these buildings are assets to the school district. They have great community value. And in many cases, alumni groups are passionate about their preservation. So the independent agency management that this resolution gets behind would allow for more bold and creative solutions for the renovation and reuse of these historic school buildings, and provides hope for a better preservation outcome with this management structure. Because it is often and usually really cheaper to renovate current buildings and bring them up to modern standards than to demolish them for new construction. It's also more environmentally friendly in an age when we are grappling with climate change. So to discard these buildings and throw them away is a waste of resources, which we really cannot afford. In cases where it's not possible to renovate, then we recommend the school district sell the buildings to avoid demolition. And that has been done successfully in places like the Bach School in South Philadelphia, which I'm sure everyone is familiar with, and also the former General John F. Reynolds School in North Philadelphia, which has recently been renovated with historic tax credits and low-income tax credits by HELP 6 for affordable housing for formerly homeless veterans. The Preservation Alliance for Greater Philadelphia is and can be a resource to the school district and to the city to help reimagine, that is, the future of the school district's valuable real estate portfolio. That concludes my testimony, and I thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you for your testimony, and thank you for all the work that you do. We appreciate your perspective and your service to the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and have a good day.
You too. Mr. Maynard, will you please, or tech support, can you please call the next witness to testify?
Our next and final witness for public comment is Jim Lewis. Mr. Lewis, are you connected? Jim Lewis, are you connected, sir?
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
You're connected with Philadelphia City Council. You wanted to testify on resolution 230330.
Yes.
Please state your name and begin your testimony.
Yeah. Good morning, Chairman Thomas and members of the Education Committee. My name is Jim Lewis. I am a lifelong resident of Philadelphia, a proud graduate of Frankford High School, and upon my retirement at the Philadelphia School District, I was the Senior Vice President for Facilities and Operations. It was with deep interest when Chairman Thomas first spoke about creating an authority to oversee the facilities at the school district. While I favor this committee's willingness to create such an authority, I am sure this committee understands the issues that confront the school district. Everyone involved in the education business understands that every budgeted operating dollar is targeted towards the classroom, affording Philadelphia students the best education they can receive. While that is understood, what the public does not see is the operating budgets for the school district's facilities and operations have been cut to the bone. There is little to no preventive maintenance. Ongoing maintenance issues in Philadelphia schools are addressed by staffing levels that are not consistent with industry standards. As I stated earlier, I support this committee's effort in creating this authority, as it should free up the superintendent's time to concentrate on the most important job, working with faculty and staff and providing a quality education for Philadelphia students. I have always felt that the top educator at the school district should not be punished with negative press for the shortcomings of the school's facilities. This proposed authority could work closely with this city council, the mayor, and other city divisions in creating a framework that will change facilities for the good of our students and staff. The latest headlines concerning school closings is a wake-up call, and I'm sure it is the core reason for today's hearing. Having spent my whole career at the school district, 33 years, I look forward in seeing a different way in which to manage our school facilities. I know there are a lot of good working men and women that work in facilities and operations, as well as the capital program office. These fine men and women have watched how inadequate funding has caused a decline in the infrastructure of our schools. Hopefully, this committee's intervention will be a new way to bring our schools back to safe, state-of-the-art classrooms. When I was tasked with managing our schools' facilities and operations, our mission statement was this: to provide a clean, safe environment to ensure our students can achieve at high levels. Thank you for your time and attention.
No, thank you. Thank you for your testimony, your perspective, as well as your service to the city of Philadelphia is greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Maynard, was that the last person for public comment?
That was indeed, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Council members? Well, I want to thank everybody for being a part of this conversation today. Today is another step forward in us trying to put ourselves in a position to address the facilities crisis that we're facing here in the city of Philadelphia. So with that being said, I appreciate everybody for participating in today's conversation. I know I learned a lot. I hope other folks learned a lot as it relates to how we can address this issue. But there being no other further questions or comments from members of the committee or no other witnesses to testify, I will ask that we get ready to conclude the business of this committee. And we will now recess this hearing at the call of the chair. Thank you, everybody, and have a good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have a great afternoon. Thank you, colleagues.
Thank you for hanging in there with me. I know this was a long one, but an important conversation. So thank you.